A very good afternoon to every one of you. Welcome back to the program. We are here for a little discussion as the program outlined. My name is Deepal. I'll be the moderator. And the topic of our discussion is different views, different results, why belief matters in meditation. And as you can see on to my right, there are full-time practitioners, 2 of them. On my left, there are full-time researchers, medical professionals, very eminent 2 professors. So I belong to neither of those groups, so I'm just an ordinary person. So I have the excuse of asking the questions that any one of you would ask. So I'll try to play the naughty role here. Let me introduce the panelists first, but I will not deliberate to introduce the venerable monks here. On my left are 2 advisory board members of the Center of Meditation Research. It is affiliated to the University of Colombo, Faculty of Medicine. And they have been doing a lot of work in taking these research findings to various fora here and overseas. Immediately next to me is Professor Vajira Disanayaka. He is the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Colombo and Chair and the Senior Professor of Anatomy, Genetics and Biomedical Informatics. He has been a practitioner for more than 3 decades in meditation as well, not only medicine, I suppose. And my extreme left is Emeritus Professor Saroj Jayasinghe. He is a former chair professor of medicine in the University of Colombo, a practicing specialist, physician, and a researcher. And he very politely withdrew his summary bio, and this is all what I left with. Must be he's believing in no self a little. And so how do we start this discussion? I was thinking how to position this, and then something very interesting happened last evening at the Maitri Hall Dharma talk by Venerable Ajahn Bramali. He reminded the famous anecdote by Ajahn Bramali about a young doctor who visited him when his patient died. He was very upset. And Ajahn Brahm had said, your role is to care, but not to always cure. And yesterday, Venerable Ajahn Bramali gave a beautiful twist to this whole example, saying curing is a worldly idea, that is to get results. So obviously the scientific community, when they approach meditation, they are concerned about results. That is my left side. Then caring, on the other hand, is more universal and spiritual in approach. So which is obviously the view of the venerable monks on the other side will represent. So this is not caring versus curing, Bhante, but the 2 perspectives. And this can be the basis of our approach because they will share a lot of experiments and research what has happened. And so in the first round, I will invite each one of them to give their perspective, maybe 10 minutes each. And after that, I will pose a few questions to clarify some of the points for the benefits. And towards the end, I'll try to summarize some of the key points in Sinhala, because otherwise it will be very impractical to go on translating this. So I'll first question to you, professors. In the last, I would say, 2 to 3 decades of the last century, now we have lived another from a last century, there was a lot of research on meditation, in the last, probably I would say, since last 1970s. Hitherto, this was not even a subject considered by Western science that can be researched. So there is eternal dialogue on, what they research is exactly the mind or the brain. We'll find a little bit more. So I would like, if you could give us a little bit of background and bring us to what you all are doing in Sri Lanka, Professor Vajra.
Thank you, Deepal, Venerable Bante's devotees. I would like to kind of bring in a philosophical kind of angle to what we are doing as medical professionals, teachers in medical schools, and so on. We've been, traditionally on a path of what we call the biomedical model of, health and well-being. And that's what we grew with in the second half of the last century, as it were. But as we, times changed, there was that realization that there was something beyond that. So if you look at the mission of the medical faculty of medicine of the University of Colombo, our mission is to produce graduates who can practice with competence, compassion, and care. So you can see that we have brought in a lot of human angle to this beyond the biomedical model, where we are dealing with the competence angle of the practitioners that we produce. There's this famous saying in our profession that what we can strive to do is to cure sometimes, to treat often, and comfort always. And that is what we have strived to do. And that is the kind of practitioner that we try to produce from our medical faculties. So while contemplating on all of these factors about 10 years ago, there was this opportunity in the faculty with the kind of thinking brought on by Professor Saroj Jayasinghe and like-minded others, that we should look at, compassion and care beyond, just two words, but to look at it from our own kind of, knowledge, traditional knowledge, Buddhist philosophy and all that angle, and to see whether we can bring in something that could be beneficial to society. So if you look at the medical profession, the science behind medicine, we look at always outcomes of our treatment. So we can define whether it's an outcome in terms of health of your nervous system or the cardiovascular system or the respiratory system, or what makes you what you are, your genes, the DNA, the hormones, the biochemical molecules, and so on. So you can define outputs. So that is what the Center for Meditation Research has been doing. So we've been defining outcomes and then using meditation practices as, if you want to call it, a treatment to achieve those outcomes. And through that research, we have shown that there is change occurring at cellular level. the chromosomes that your DNA molecules are located in become healthier. As you age, usually they become shorter, but in long-term meditation practitioners, they are longer. You look at the biochemical molecules, you have more of the healthy molecules in long-term meditation practitioners. If you look at the hormones, the good hormones, beyond the stress hormones, which are supposed to be bad, which are known to be bad. You go beyond that, you find that there is better healing of the nervous system, more healthy cardiovascular system, even more healthy respiratory system, and the gut, and so on. So the meditation practice really brings about a fundamental change in the human body, leading to health and well-being. Of course, perhaps the attainment of higher levels of dhyana and so on are the extreme, outcomes of those who are intense practitioners. At the same time, if you look at it from Margapala in terms of Sovan, Sakurdagami, Anagami and Arahat, it could be the other, the paths. But we've shown through the work that we have undertaken that these changes do occur and exist. Now, the topic of today's discussion is different views. What you bring into this practice, does it alter? So, I know there are doctors in this audience and there are maybe others from the scientific background as well. And when we look at our kind of the dimensions of the human body that we test, we talk about this normal curve, the bell curve as it were. And in that bell curve, there are the two extremes. So yes, when we do this research, we find that some do better than others. So there could be other, aspects that a practitioner brings in to his practice that makes you do better or worse. But what those aspects are require, further research. But we acknowledge the fact that there is diversity in the outcomes, in terms of medical outcomes, in the practitioners who are engaged in meditative practice. But in the long run, there is no doubt that it has immense benefit. So I'd like to, leave at that, Deepal, and hand over to you, and maybe pass on to Professor.
Pass on to Professor Roche to take a little bit on a more wider context, how it has evolved.
Thank you very much, Venerable monks, ladies and gentlemen. I am a researcher and I am coming from the world of research to try and see what sort of scientific explanations can be given to meditative practice. So it's a case of science chasing after what the Lord Buddha has preached several thousands of years ago. Because we find using the instruments we have that we can confirm certain changes in the body which happen with meditation. As Prof. Vajra mentioned, there are certain changes which happen, and these seem to be seen in certain instruments and so on which we use. To start off with, initial interest in the so-called Western scientific world began probably in 1960s in the US, where they looked at mainly transcendental meditation. And they described certain changes in the electrical activity of the brain. So when your brain is working, there's certain electrical activities we are able to look at by an instrument called EEG. And they found there were certain changes in meditators. And they described a thing called a relaxation response in meditators. Later on, again in the States, they used mindfulness. They removed everything religious about it and used it as a technique of therapy in mindfulness-based stress reduction. That was again 1970s. But what really triggered a lot of interest was in 1980s or so, with some of the studies where they looked at the structure of the brain. Now, when you do the EEG, you're looking at the electrical activity, but now you can look at the structure of the brain. You can see it with, we are familiar with CT scans and MRIs. With the MRI, you can really see certain parts of the brain. And the technique also allows you to look at the blood flow and the use of oxygen by the cells. So if you are thinking and a certain part of the brain is working more, the oxygen usage in that part increases, and you can see it from the MRI. So in other words, now we can look at the structure as well as some of the functions of the brain. And then they were amazed because long-term meditators had changes, permanent changes in the brain. That's what we call neuroplasticity. Right? When they go on meditating, you see certain permanent changes. So this brought in a whole new area of research, because now you're able to look at the function as it happens, and then you can look at the structure of the brain of long-term meditators. And this is what led to a whole area of research on the effects of meditation on the brain. And now we find correlations. We can see certain changes in the way the networks are functioning. So not only the structure, now we look at how these different areas are firing. You must remember that the brain has 86 billion neurons and probably 500 to 1,000 trillion connections. So it's unimaginable. But we are able to look at it at some sort of level. And this has now led to research showing that long-term meditators, in fact, have different brains. Right? And how you get there can depend on the duration, but more on the duration, there is certain skills of meditation. And that's where the masters are important, because you can arrive at certain changes in your brain even with a shorter time, but by intense meditation. And in addition to all this, you have some of the changes which Prof. Vajra mentioned at the level of the cell and at the level of tissues like blood pressure and so on, but at the level of the nucleus. those who are well versed in science will realize, you're talking of subcellular, inside the cell, certain changes happening in long-term meditators. And some of the studies done in our faculty have also shown this. So we are seeing a huge change in the way we look at meditation and meditators from the view of science, because there's accumulating evidence of all this. Now, to tie it up with the caring and compassion, again, very fascinating studies which show that loving kindness meditation, metta meditation, actually increases your compassion. So if you go on doing metta meditation, you become a better person. Now, the common criticism is that, that person is meditating, but he's such and such a useless person who is bad. Well, the answer to that is, if the person didn't meditate, he might have been worse. So, he or she. So there's good evidence now of how long-term metta meditation will rewire your brain and make people more compassionate. So now this brings a huge area, a novel area, because now you're talking of what we call epidemiology of compassion. Can a society be made more compassionate by mass actions such as meditation and training people to meditate from childhood? I think the evidence is very strong that it can be done, and Sri Lanka certainly should be taking a lead in this, because it's in our culture. Even though the medical profession lagged behind while going and meditating on Saturday and Sunday on Poya Day, but never applied it to our medical practice until someone from overseas told us to do so. So anyway, that's my opening. Thank you.
මම හිතනවා මේ කියපු කරුණු වලින් කීපයක් මම සිංහලෙන් කිව්වොත් අපිට ඊළඟ කොටසට යනකොට ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වෙයි. මේ මහාචාර්යවරු දෙදෙනාගේම කතාවේ හරය ගත්තොත් මෑත කාලයක ලෝකේ භාවනා කිරීමේ ලැබෙන ප්‍රතිඵල පිළිබඳව ලොකු උනන්දුවක් ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ පිළිබඳ නොඑක් පරීක්ෂණ කරලා තියෙනවා විද්‍යාත්මක ක්‍රම භාවිතා කරලා. එතෙන්දී හොයාගෙන තියෙනවා දැන් සෑහෙන විශ්වසනීය තත්වයකට මේ දිගු කාලයක් භාවනා කිරීම නිසා පුද්ගලයන්ගේ සෛලවල වෙනස්කම් සිදු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම මොලේ වෙනස්කම් සිදු වෙනවා. මොලේ විවිධ පැතිකඩවල් එක්ක කරන ගනුදෙනු වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඒ මිනිස්සුගේ සත්වයාගේ මනුෂ්‍යයාගේ ස්වභාවය වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඔවුන්ගේ හෝමෝන් වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඔවුන්ගේ සෛලවල වෙනස් වීම නිසා ඔවුන්ගේ ආයුෂ වැඩි වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම මේ විද්‍යාඥයින්ට හොයාගන්න පුළුවන් වෙලා තියෙනවා දැන් අලුත්ම විදිහට මේ සාමාන්‍ය භාවනාවට අමතරව මෛත්‍රියත් එක්කව කරොත් ඒ මිනිස්යන්ගේ හැසිරීමේ වෙනසකුත් සිදු වෙනවා කියලා. මෙතෙන්දී මේ මහාචාර්යවරු යෝජනා කරනවා ඇත්තටම දැන් අපිට මේක දැන් විද්‍යාත්මකවත් තහවුරු වෙලා තියෙන නිසා භාවනාව අගය කරන්නා වූ සමාජයක් හැටියට අපිට මේක පුළුල් කරොත් එහෙම සමාජයේ එතුමා වචනයක් පාවිච්චි කරා එපිඩෙමොලොජි මම දන්නේ ඒකට සිංහල වචනේ මොකක්ද කියලා මම හිතන්නේ කියන්නේ දැන් එපිඩෙමි එකක් කියලා කියන්නේ ලෙඩක් බෝ වෙන එකක් නේ මේක බෝ කරගන්න පුළුවන් හොඳ ලෙඩක් වගේ කතාවක් තමයි කියුනේ කමන්නේ දැන් මේ ඉන්නේ හැමෝටම පොඩ්ඩක් හරි ඒ ලෙඩේ තියෙනවා කියලා හිතනවා. Bante, you heard the interesting discoveries they are making from a scientific point of view. And one important point they made is you have to do a long-term meditation practiced a bit. Some of us who try to meditate, people say, even though you meditate, now you have given an answer, right? Maybe would have been a much worse person than now. And you have been emphasizing on the importance of the attitude. Now, when we hear the benefits of meditation like this, somebody might want to meditate, oh, well, if I can meditate, I can live a little longer. Now, on the other hand, Buddha also, for example, in Mettanisansa Sutta, talks about 11 benefits, out of that 10 in this life. So, shouldn't I start developing metta because my face will look better and I will be loved by more and all that? Is that a wrong attitude, or what is the attitude that you want to bring in?
Okay, good. So first of all, thank you for the professors for the interesting presentation. And I think, obviously, that we have good results from meditation in the medical realm is obviously a contribution to the happiness of humanity. So obviously, it's a very positive thing. However, I think the problem is that as Buddhist monastics, that is not the main focus. It's a different kind of focus. And so often we end up talking a little bit past each other, I think. So both realms, both areas may be true at the same time, and still you approach them in slightly different ways because the outcome you're trying to achieve is different. But anyway, I agree, and I'm also very glad that you are both into caring, not just curing. That's very positive, yeah? We already agree on so much, so that's marvelous. So big sadhu for that. I think one of the kind of big issues from a monastic point of view is that when we look at the mindfulness movement as it was started in the United States in the late 1960s and 1970s, mindfulness-based stress reduction, John Kabat-Zinn at the, which university? Massachusetts University, Massachusetts General Hospital or something like that. What they did, in effect, was take out one element of the Buddhist path and isolate it from the other elements. So instead of having a noble eightfold path, you had an ignoble onefold path. It's not ignoble. It's not quite noble, but it's still a good one. Yes, but you have the onefold path. And if you isolate mindfulness from the other factors, then from a Buddhist point of view, you don't really have the supporting factors for mindfulness to really become powerful. If mindfulness is effective, you want to make it as powerful as possible. And so you need to add some of the other factors that actually empower it. And I think if a little bit of mindfulness has good results, then medium mindfulness is going to have more results, and superpower mindfulness, that's the word from Ajahn Brahm, and always quoting Ajahn Brahm, superpower mindfulness is going to have even more results. So you want to amp up the mindfulness a little bit to make it more powerful. And so the question then is, how do we do that? And this has to do with attitude and these kind of things. And according to the suttas, if we're going to quote the Buddha on this, he says there's two factors that are determine how powerful, how well the mindfulness is going to be developed. And those two things are sila on the one hand, in other words, your morality or your attitude. Morality is very much about attitude. Are you a kind person? Are you a harsh person? Do you have compassion? Do you have metta? All of these kind of things. On the other hand, it's ujjuka ditti. Ujjuka ditti basically means straight view or right view. In other words, a view that accords with the Buddhist way of describing the world. And these are the two factors that we kind of need to add to make mindfulness really powerful. And this is, I think, being recognized slowly. It took a while before it happened. Now it is happening also in the United States. They're recognizing the importance of ethics and morality, how that actually enhances mindfulness. And it's very obvious why that is the case. If you are an ethical and kind-hearted person, you tend to feel good about yourself. We all know if you make a mistake, you do something which isn't quite nice, and then you feel bad about yourself afterwards. Bad ethics lead to bad mental health, I suppose. Sometimes they call that moral injury. Moral injury is one of these modern terminology. If you are immoral, you injure yourself psychologically through that. And moral injury means basically that you feel bad, you feel rotten, you have trauma, you have stress, all of these kind of things. And of course, it's much more difficult to be really present if you have these kind of moral injuries in your life. However, if you are a good person with good qualities, you have a general sense of metta and compassion, the present feels very nice. And when the present feels nice, it's really, really easy to be mindful. You just want to be here because the here is nice. The fantasizing is worse. And so for that reason, mindfulness becomes very easy to achieve. So this is one aspect where attitude is very important, the idea of sila, the sila attitude. The other one is the view. And this is where we are probably getting a little bit away from the kind of scientific outlook on things. So you had to excuse me for being slightly non-scientific here. Actually, maybe it isn't non-scientific. Maybe, and this is one of my theories, that we tend to distinguish between the secular world and the religious world, as if these two spheres of inquiry or these two spheres of whatever are somehow completely separate. But I think this is a mistake, and I think the idea of secularism is something that grew out of European history in the age of Enlightenment in Europe, where they were trying to separate state and church. But that was a very different kind of religion from the sort of religion we are used to these days. And I think this distinction between religion and secularism actually is outdated. And it isn't really as useful as it was at that time in the Middle Ages in Europe. And so for this reason, I think we can listen more to certain so-called religious ideas. Anyway, is Buddhism a religion anyway? Religion is a Western word derived from the Western experience. Does it really apply to Buddhism? It is not at all obvious that that is the case. And I would argue that in many ways it does not apply. And so what does Buddhism have to say then? If we open our minds a little bit in this way, what does Buddhism have to say? And what Buddhism has to say, that if you want to create real happiness in your life, real happiness comes from your spiritual qualities, not from the worldly outcomes. Whatever worldly outcome you may have in terms of your work, in terms of your schooling, in terms of many things, that worldly outcome will give a certain amount of satisfaction, but often it gives no satisfaction at all because you fail in that outcome. Very often it's not up to you, it's up to external circumstances whether you will succeed or not. And so from a right values point of view, it is far more important to emphasize the spiritual values because that is where you actually do create a fundamental happiness within yourself, an overcoming of mental suffering. The spiritual, so we need to invert the hierarchy of values. Instead of putting the worldly values on top, and the spiritual qualities are there to support the worldly outcomes. And this is basically what my esteemed professors on the left here are saying, and I don't have an issue with that really. I understand why they're coming from that point of view. You use meditation to support worldly outcomes. We would say it should be the other way around. You should actually have the spiritual values on top, and all the worldly things should go into those spiritual values, so that you live a life, your worldly life supports the spiritual qualities instead. So it's an inversion of the pyramid of what is valuable. And that is how you can create a proper, real foundation of happiness for human beings. Anyway, I've said too much already, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Before I move on to Venerable Damita, I'll just quick points in Sinhala. So it's important to build the story. අපේ මහාචාර්යවරුන්ගේ අදහසට වෙනස් විදිහකට තමයි ආජාන් බ්‍රහ්මාලි මේකට ප්‍රවේශ වෙන්නේ. උන්වහන්සේගේ එක වැදගත් අවධානයක් තමයි මේ භාවනාවට යොමු වෙනකොට තියෙන්න ඕන ආකල්පය කුමක්ද කියන එක. එතෙන්දි ප්‍රධාන කාරණා දෙකක් උන්වහන්සේ සඳහන් කරා. එකක් තමයි මේ ශීලය කියන එක. එතකොට සිල්වත් වීම තුළ තමන් තුළ ඇතිවෙන ඒ මානසික නිදහස සිහිය වැඩිවීමට උපකාර වෙනවා. දෙවෙනි එක තමයි සම්මා දිට්ඨිය. උන්වහන්සේගේ උදේ ධර්ම දේශනාවේදී කියපු ප්‍රධාන කරුණක් නැවතත් අවධාරණය කරා. මොකද නියම සතුට කියන එක උන්වහන්සේ විග්‍රහ කරන්නේ අර මේ ලෞකික දේවල් වලට පස්සේ ලැබෙන එකක් හැටියට නෙමෙයි. අධ්‍යාත්මික සතුට පළවෙනි තැන දාගත්තාම එතකොට ඉතුරු ඒවා ටිකට නියම තැන ලැබෙනවා කියන එක. මේක උන්වහන්සේ කියන්නේ හරියට ත්‍රිකෝණය උඩි යටි කුරු කරලා බලන්න කියනවා වගේ. මට මෙතෙන්දි මතක් වෙනවා ආජාන් බ්‍රහම් කියපු කතාවක්. You first find time for meditation and then you will find time for everything else. Ajahn Bramali කිව්වා අහම්දුරෝ කිව්වක පාදක් ඉස්සෙල්ලා භාවනාව හොයාගන්න ඊට පස්සේ ඔබට අනිත් ඒවාට වෙලාව හම්බ වෙයි කියලා. අපි හිතන්නේ අනිත් පැත්ත. මම හිතන්නේ මේ උන්වහන්සේගේ අදහසෙත් ඒකමයි තියෙන්නේ. Venerable Damita, as a practitioner, how would you see this relationship, right? Looking for results from meditation and looking at our attitudinal way of approaching it. You must be having some practical experiences.
Thank you, dear Ajahn and learned professors. So it was nice to listen to you, professors, and I would like to add a little bit more what Ajahn already mentioned. But first of all, if I talk about the reason behind why we sort of sit together, talk about this matter, is that we know actually in this time people have sort of like the worldview of science has become very dominant and for a good reason. And what we see, all this progress and things, actually that's due to science. So we see sometimes as Buddhists or any sort of interested party that if we can get another sort of like we do like a triangulation, like you try to sort of position yourself where on the map, you sort of look at a peak and you try to determine you are here, and if you get another reading to another peak on the landscape, you are so sure that you are exactly here. So we would like to hear from the scientific perspective also, and like the questions we had today, Ajahn answered. There also we see like, okay, is there a way we can sort of explain these things like rebirth through science? Although we know that the territory of science is more into this physical sort of a realm, and spirituality mostly about the mental qualities, as Ajahn pointed out. Still, we see that now the science is kind of taking interest in this new avenue of how the mind works and things like that. So a lot of Buddhists are like interested sometimes, like just to kind of get a perspective actually what these learned scientists would say about a certain thing. Having said that, we know at the end of the day there is this sort of a different sort of a realm also. But we try to basically, as I say it, this interest of meditation, actually it was inspired by the Buddhist practices and any other sort of practices. We see people are practicing and eventually made into like hypothesis to test whether they are really working what these religious people are going on about it, whether they are working. And they have sort of seen in certain sort of a restricted, sort of a, controlled environment, they can prove, okay, they are up onto something. But there are these other things still, it's very difficult for like hard-nosed scientists to sort of agree because of this objective reality they are sort of focused on rather than the subjective reality we are talking about as religious people. We get that. But on the other hand, in a more general sense, we know actually we have the respect, we have this mutual respect that, we are seeking sort of the reality or the truth in our own ways. And of course, using it for the betterment of the humankind, especially for our country and all. So I wanted to mention that bit also. Just to add more what Ajahn already mentioned, just kind of mostly repeating. But one of the things inspired me to engage in such a discussion was that this idea, Ajahn Brahm sometimes say that it's not the object, it's how you watch it. He says that sometimes. Now, from a traditional Buddhist perspective and all these sort of book learning and things, as a junior monk, it was like very surprising because we are so much focused on what this meditation object is anapanasati, we are doing metta, whether, if I do this particular meditation, whether I can get to jhana or whether I can't get to jhana. Or there are so many sort of complications sort of made, especially in the later Buddhist literature, and so much focus on this technique itself. I think Ajahn would agree with me if I say that at the beginning, the Lord Buddha, when he talks about this project of Nibbana, it's about the Noble Eightfold Path. But down the line, we start to say, okay, there are these meditation techniques, more like a packaged, portable sort of a thing which you can sort of very easily convey to another person or to across a culture, across the country, like this sort of a thing. So inevitably, these things become more compartmentalized, very well regimented, holistic kind of approach is gone. Now, okay, if you don't have time to meditate, just do this bit. Just have this plant and have it in a pot in your apartment because you can't sort of possibly have a forest in your backyard or something. In a way, it totally makes sense. We try to sort of make use of these things, but inevitably the perception changes. Instead of Lord Buddha talked about a path, suddenly we talk about a technique, and this paradigm, this way of thinking of technique, has a big influence that you can easily forget about what the background is, what the how you are relating to it, where you are coming from, and all. Just do your meditation, me and my meditation. That's all. So all this selfishness, all these kind of unwanted things, like this remark, this learned professor mentioned, okay, so and so is meditating, but still hosalanging masayanna bෑ. On one hand, yes, it would have been worse if they don't meditate. But on the other hand, maybe we can ask whether they are sort of practicing it in the correct way. Is it just the focus on merely the object, me and my breath meditation, or why am I doing this thing in the first place? Are we asking this question why at all? So that's what I wanted to point out.
I think හාමුදුරුවෝ කියපු ටික හාමුදුරුවන්ගේ කතාවේ දෙක පුංචි උදාහරණයකින් සියල්ල සමරයිස් කරා හාමුදුරුවෝ මේ අපිට ගේ පිටිපස්සේ වනයක් වවා ගන්න බැරි නිසා තට්ටු නිවාසක ඉන්නකොට අපි ගෙනහැල්ලා පොඩි පැලයක් තියාගන්නවා. එතකොට මේ ප්‍රතිඵල සඳහා යම් කිසි භාවනා ක්‍රමයක් ගැන විතරක් හිතනකොට අපිට අර වනය අමතක වෙනවද කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තමයි උන්වහන්සේ බොහොම ගැඹුරෙන් ඇහුවේ. Professor, I have two questions I would allow any one of you to pick up. One is arising from what Ajahn said. Have there been any instances where we have experimented the morality side? Because I know there had been experiments in prisons where people have, in prisons I don't think they do much harm to anything. They are not criminals anymore. But they have tried, so our first question is there anything in science which can suggest? Because the morality will always have the guilt feeling when you realize I did something wrong. But at the moment I do it, I don't think I am doing anything wrong. But later only I think that is wrong. The moment you realize, so that's where the regret comes. Has any research done to find out whether there has been any impact of such things, or do you think it's a hypothesis worth exploring?
Thank you very much. So, offhand, I can't recall any specific scientific study as such which has been done. But certainly, when you get a group of people to meditate, there are changes in the way they think and the way they behave. So what we call pro-social behavior. So all these are experiments where they look at, they try to measure. Scientists try to measure the immeasurable at one level, but you try to measure pro-social behavior. And with meditation, there seems to be a change. So over to you. Vajra, why don't you take it on?
There is an interesting study done by our own group which shows that those who are long-term meditators cultivate good practices. And as a result of that, the carbon footprint, that is what we are measuring now to look at the environmental impact, the carbon footprint left behind by those who are engaged in a long-term meditation is smaller than the footprint of others, purely by the behavioral changes that is brought through meditative practices. So, sitting there not doing anything. No, I think consumption patterns change. So they are not excessive consumption, they are not materialistic, their consumption patterns change. They'll be mindful in the way they, use their materialistic world, if you put it that way. And that brings about that change. So there is definite, that kind of worldly benefit that comes about.
Yeah, I think it's a chicken and egg situation because in certain instances, we will be able to get people on the noble path, and then they will use meditation as part of their path towards Nibbana or towards the noble path. Whereas there will be others who will be using meditation as an instrument. And what we are, of course, we are finding is so far is that even when you use it as an instrument, it still has its beneficial effects. And hopefully, they will also come to that path. So I think it's a sort of a, it's a system sort of thing which is happening here.
Just a segue question. When you all are researching, what kind of meditation practices do these subjects do? Is it anapanasati, or is it metta meditation, or is it kasina bhavana, or what?
Mainly anapanasati, also combination of metta as well. But I want to come back to an interesting point that came up in the presentations that the Bhantes made. That is, so if we were to reflect on the research that we have done, and the last century, the interpretation of the Buddhist scriptures centered quite a bit around the materialistic, the laukika. But there are newer interpretations of the scriptures coming up, which is more focusing on the lokottara side. So our research is pretty much the materialistic benefits of meditation, because if you look at researching the human body is made up of the Satara Mahabhuta. So our devices can only test whatever is made of Satara Mahabhuta. But the Lokottara side is abhutika. It's not made of the Satara Mahabhuta, the Manomaya Kaya and the Chitta the Kaya and so on. And we don't have devices to test those. We don't have a test in whatever form to test those. So that is an interesting challenge that we have. So some of the collaborators that we have, for example, at at Harvard University, who have access to all these devices, they can show that when meditators attain different levels of jhana, different parts of the mind gets activated. But how they get activated, you don't have the answer, because you cannot measure that. So that is where the Manomaya Kaya, Chitta the Kaya, the consciousness, and whatever the names that we use come into play. And that is, I think, the biggest challenge that we are facing in terms of our research. So, and there are very simple things where we really need to get some, we find it difficult to get consensus. Like, for example, now, what is it? Now we talked about what do you bring into meditation, right? And then in our scriptures, we have the famous kind of stanza which goes as, Aranyagato va, Rukkamulagato va, Sunyagaragato va, and all that. But what I have recently found is there is a Laukika interpretation of that and a Lokottara interpretation of that, and the Lokottara interpretation is completely different. So I was, we were waiting outside, I was telling Deepal and others, now I am a professor of anatomy, genetics and biomedical informatics, and in, anatomy, as an anatomy professor, I see dead bodies every day, we cut dead bodies every day and look at them. So if Asubha Bhavana was what it was really, perhaps by now I should have attended something. So probably not, because, we have requests from people who say, can we come and spend time looking at dead bodies? And I tell them, look, that's what we all, do every day almost. Not as the dean now, but in a previous role, I used to do that quite a bit. So therefore we need to really, reflect on what the, original Magadhi scriptures really meant, and we need to have an open conversation about it, and that is so very important. But the key thing for us is that we can research the materialistic things, but we don't have devices to capture the non-materialistic things. And that is where the limitations come. And that is where the difference, the dichotomy between knowledge and experience come. And I think what we really need to do is have a conversation with the meditation practitioners on what has your experience been. And I think we are not doing that enough.
We are doing it right now, as we speak.
Yes.
I think it's time to. Yeah. Would you like to say anything, Bhante?
Concluding remarks. I have my own microphone.
Yeah, I think if you really look at, we haven't explored the topic. We only highlighted there's an area to be discussed. I was listening to a recent dialogue on consciousness. One American professor said, look here, you guys are, that's how Americans talk, you guys are trying to measure these things with 100 years of knowledge. Whereas 5,000 years ago in Asia, they have examined these different levels of mind and so fine, we are nowhere there. So, but we shouldn't get atimana, to get conceited about, oh, we are so superior, as you said. But I think this shows that there are certain scientific evidence that is so compelling, which gives us even more encouragement to practice. And as Ajahn Bramali said in the morning, if you believe in Buddha, I think there's enough evidence what to do. And I think the best evidence comes when you practice Dharma in your own life. Don't worry too much about what happens to the others. I think that's the beauty of this Dharma. Right? All of us have tried something, and this discussion, if at all, is an encouragement and to highlight the importance of having this conversation between practicing monastics and the scientific community. Because this, as it has happened already today, mindfulness has reached, as a concept and a practice, from high security prisons to high tension boardrooms, from schools to hospitals. So it tells that there is an interest. So that's a positive thing. And as Ajahn Bramali continued to say, but the important thing is finding that right position for it. And I hope this discussion gave you a glimpse of what is possible. We are so grateful for Ajahn Bramali for spending time, and Venerable Mudita, and of course to the two learned professors. We just touched a little bit of what you could share with us. Thank you so much, professors. Thank you so much. And we have time for a little break because you need some free time before we meet at 2 o'clock for a Dhamma talk by Ajahn Bramali. And we don't have any time for any more Q&A. Yeah. So we will have a Dhamma talk at 2 o'clock, and it will be translated by Venerable Dhamita at 3 o'clock. And 3:30 will be a guided meditation on metta, and we have end with blessings and punya-anumodana, where we will remember Venerable Metta Vihari as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, please take a seat.
Please be seated. As I mentioned, this also will be translated afterwards by Venerable Damita. Avasara Bhante.
Okay. Okay, everyone. So I'm not sure how much juice I have got left, to be honest. The juice is only so much, so we'll see what happens. But we're going to carry on from what we were talking about this morning and the idea of right view, and we're going to take it a little bit further than what we did this morning. This morning was mostly about how to live a more skillful life in terms of morality and metta and karuna and all of these positive qualities. But I want to move this also into the area of meditation and maybe even the results of meditation as well, because this obviously is a very important part of the Buddhist path. So it was interesting to listen to the professors here, and they're coming from quite a different angle than we come from when we come from the spiritual practice. Because for them, the meditation is like a means for another goal. But for us, the meditation is more like an end in itself. Meditation is actually what the deep meditation is in many ways the purpose of this practice. So it's a different way of looking at things. Both are valid in their own ways, but the more profound aspects comes when you do meditation according to the Noble Eightfold Path, obviously. So I want to talk a bit about meditation, how to incorporate right view. And one of the most basic things I want to talk about is just ordinary meditation practice. How can you sit down for however long you practice every day, 20 minutes, half an hour, or whatever it is that you do, and sort of get something really out of that? How can we ensure that our meditation is used in the most skillful kind of way here? And one of the kind of interesting thing is that you will hear anyone who is a skilled meditator say is that you shouldn't really be doing much effort in your meditation. Meditation should be a natural process. Meditation should ideally just emerge out of those other qualities that we practice on the Noble Eightfold Path. And when it does that, meditation is so easy. You sit back, you just wait, you enjoy, you are patient, hopefully, and then the meditation develops all by itself. And it's a very beautiful process. It's beautiful because you become like a passenger. You are someone who observes the meditation process happening to you rather than you being in the driver's seat. And that is such a Buddhist way of thinking about things, because being in the driver's seat means a self, it means an ego, it means a particular point of view in the world. But being a passenger takes away that self, it takes away the ego, it removes that one thing which is such a big obstruction on the Buddhist path. So how can we do that in practice? And one way that I recommend people to do the meditation is to avoid this idea of focusing on the meditation object. Very often, if you ask a meditation teacher, they will say, focus on the breath, focus on the metta idea of metta, may all beings be happy, etc. And by focusing on that, you kind of narrow down your focus and you become stilled or concentrated because of that. In our monastery in Perth, the word concentration is prohibited. So if you ever come and visit Perth, don't use the word concentration. You might be asked to go back to Sri Lanka again. And the reason is because the word concentration in English usually means that you use the mind and you force the mind onto what you're doing. There's a degree of willpower there, a degree of effort coming from the sense of self. And that is not how the Buddha teaches meditation in the suttas. Isn't that interesting? The Buddha doesn't say, focus on the breath. What the Buddha says instead, he says, and this is straight from the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta on mindfulness of breathing, what the Buddha says, establish mindfulness. Yeah, parimukkang satting upatapetva, having established mindfulness, parimukkang, we had a question about that before, what that means, just in the present or in the front or something like that. That is number one. And then the Buddha says, mindfully you breathe in, mindfully you breathe out. Sattova asasati, satto pasasati, or something like that. Please forgive my pronunciation of Pali words. But something to that effect. There's nothing there about focusing. There is giving rise to mindfulness, and then you are mindful while you're breathing, and that's all there is to it. And the way to think about that is thinking of being in the presence of something rather than focusing on something. So you go for a walk in the forest somewhere, you go like I do. I was very lucky, I went all the way up to Rittigala, and that was just really fabulous going into the forest. And when you go into the forest, you don't focus on nature. You don't focus on the tree. Yeah, focus on the tree. Yeah, that destroys the whole purpose of the joy of being in the forest. Instead of focusing, you just enjoy the walk in the forest. You take in the good feeling of the forest, the feeling of peace, the feeling of shaded trees, the feeling of things being alive around you, the beautiful greenery everywhere. You allow your senses to be permeated by that nice feeling of being in the forest. You are with nature. You don't focus on nature. And we can take that idea into our meditation. In meditation, instead of focusing on the breath, you are with the breath. So you do the same thing as you do at Rittigala. And when you are with the breath, you enjoy the good qualities of the breath. When the breath is looked upon in the right way, the breath is kind of gentle, the breath is soft, the breath has a kind of cooling effect, it has a nice rhythm to it. There's something very delightful about the breath, just like there is the delight in the forest. And when you see the delight in the breath, you can be with the breath rather than focusing on the breath. And that kind of meditation is so nice because it's so relaxed, it's so at ease. You sit there, you enjoy what is going on. You don't have this feeling of pressuring your mind or trying very hard. Instead, you find enjoyment. And I think this is one of the most important things about the spiritual path. It should be a happy path. It should be joyful. It should add value to our lives. Sometimes the way the Buddhist spiritual path is practiced, it detracts value. Your life becomes worse. You know what I mean? You go on a meditation retreat and you sit too much, too many hours in meditation, and you have pains here and pains there. I remember many years ago I met this man in Singapore, and he had been to a meditation retreat, and he told me, "This is the last time I will go on a meditation retreat." That was the worst experience of my life. So much pain, so much tension, so utterly unpleasant. I refuse to ever have anything to do with meditation ever again. And I said to him, well, not all retreats are the same. Sometimes, you can relax more, you can be at ease, and you can enjoy the meditation. He said, no, absolutely not. I'm given up on meditation once and for all. Don't want to hear the word meditation. And he was still very nice to me, but he obviously had gotten the wrong kind of instructions, I would say, because these are not the instructions that you find in the suttas. And so meditation is more like a natural thing. It develops by itself. And the suttas, the Buddha actually says that the evolution of meditation is dhammata. Dhammata means in accordance with nature. Lawfully, there's a lawfulness to it. Causes and conditions have to be in place. And when those causes and conditions are in place, that's what I was talking about this morning, then the meditation just works all by itself. It kind of takes off and develops because of the causes and conditions. If you try to force something that is a natural process, if you try to make a natural process go faster because you are impatient, you will destroy the natural process. I will give you an example. An example is like a small child. A small child wants to gets a little seed by its mother. The mother says, okay, here is a seed, yeah? Put that seed in the ground. It's like a sunflower seed. Sunflowers tend to grow very fast. So put that in the ground and go watering a little bit every day. And so the little child is very happy, puts the seed in the ground like, a couple of centimeters under the top or whatever. It comes with water and pours the water. And after a while gets very impatient, like small children tend to be sometimes. Mommy, nothing is happening. Okay, be patient. And eventually it starts to sprout. And a little sprout comes through the ground, yeah, and the child is very excited. Wow, it's sprouting. Mommy, wow, look at this. And then it sprouts, but then it grows very slowly. It only grows a couple of millimeters every day. And after a while, the child decides to help nature. Yeah, nature is too slow. I want to help nature. And so the child grabs hold of that little sprout coming out of the ground, and to help it, it pulls the sprout. That is the end of that sunflower. Yeah, that doesn't work. If you try to help nature, natural things happen in a certain way, I end up destroying it instead. So don't be like the little child who pulls that kind of thing too hard and then destroys the whole process. So things are natural. Things happen according to cause and conditions. This is one of the foundational ideas in the Dharma in Buddhism. Causes and conditions, not according to how we want things to be. Yeah, this is the right view of processes in the Dhamma. We have to put the causes, the root causes into place, and then the processes happen in accordance with that. And the root causes here are the things we talked about this morning, the sila, and also some of this right view that we have been talking about. So this is one of the first things to remember in meditation. And if you can remember that, you will have so much more fun in the meditation. Make the meditation fun. Make it joyful. Make it delightful. Make it something positive. And then it will kind of work far better. However, that is not really enough, because if you try to meditate in that way, just allowing things to be, one of the things that you will find is that there is so much thinking going on in your mind. Has anybody here ever had problems with thinking in meditation? I should actually ask, has anyone not had a problem with thinking in the meditation? If you have never had a problem, then congratulations, I'll be very impressed. Yeah, we can come and we can give you the Arahant stamp afterwards. We'll give you a book, Certified Arahant. But this is a problem everyone has. And this has to do, large part, because our views about the world are wrong. We were discussing a little bit before about the kind of value hierarchy, and your value hierarchy is wrong. The reason why these professors will never be successful in creating a high degree of mindfulness in their patients is because they are using mindfulness to affect worldly things. Mindfulness is a subsidiary thing. Mindfulness is secondary. It is used to produce results in the world. And that means that the worldly things are more important and mindfulness is less important. The values of the world are on top. The values of mindfulness and the spiritual path are below. It's the wrong kind of hierarchy from a Buddhist point of view. Because if that is the hierarchy, it means that whenever an interesting thought appears in your mind, that is going to be your priority, because that is the world making itself enter the meditation. And because the world is more important, because the world is on top of the hierarchy, you will go with that thought, and that thought will never really leave your mind. Why? Because it is more important than the meditation. And this is kind of... this is where that mindfulness that is done in a secular context is going to be very limited and only not go all that far. So what can we do? How can we reverse the value hierarchy? How can we put the mindfulness on top and all the worldly things beneath? How can we change this around? And the way to change that around is to basically remember what really matters in the world. What are the things that truly are going to give good results? How is your future created? Everything in life is pretty much about the future. So much in life is about craving and desires, trying to get a better tomorrow than what we have today or yesterday. When you sit down and you start thinking, a lot of those thoughts are about creating the future, solving problems, trying to get from here to somewhere else. All of that is creating the future in a certain way. However, what you find instead of creating the future, what you find is that there's always more problems. Another problem behind the present one. You solve this problem, there's another one to be resolved. You have this plan, and then that plan doesn't work out, there's another plan tomorrow. Everything is just more and more of the same, and there's no aim, there's no solution, there's no final way out with that sort of thinking. So the way to create the future, rather than just going around and round in circles, not getting anywhere, resolving problems endlessly, is to understand that the real way to create the future is the spiritual path. This is the idea of kamma or karma. This is the idea that when you practice in the right way, you are creating happiness for yourself and others. That is what the spiritual path is about. So creating the future is done by practicing the spiritual path, not by thinking about the future and how to resolve all the problems. And once you get that, once you get this idea that sitting peacefully, being quiet, having a degree of compassion and metta, that is how you create the future. That is how you create more happiness for yourself. Then all that thinking about the problems, suddenly it starts to seem irrelevant, and you can leave it by the wayside. And the reason is very simply because you have right view about how to create that future that you really want for yourself. It's an inversion of values. You start to see what really matters. The matters is the spiritual path, and not all of those worldly problems and issues that you have to deal with. They are always secondary. So you have to be very clear in your life about what gives rise to real happiness and what actually solves things, what has a real goal, what has a real outcome, what takes you somewhere. That is always the spiritual path. The spiritual path has a real purpose. The purpose is more and more happiness, the reduction in suffering, and ultimately the highest happiness of all, which of course is nibbana. That is the purpose. Whereas worldly life just goes round and round in circles. It never gets you anywhere. You are in the middle of solving a problem, and then you die. And then when you get reborn, you start solving problems again. The reason we are still here is because we solved too many problems in our past lives. Problems that just perpetuated themselves and give rise to new problems ad infinitum, forever, without any end in sight. So please stop that. The reason why you're suffering now is because you solved too many problems in the past. If you want to suffer in your future life, be my guest. Solve more problems. Don't do that. It's not the way forward. Instead, understand there is another way out, the way of meditation, the way of the Noble Eightfold Path. Inverse the values, put the spiritual practice at the top, everything else goes underneath. So this is the right way of doing it, right way of thinking. I want to add a small point to this. Apparently, I'm being told that there are teenagers here in Sri Lanka who are really stressed about life and about their exams and all these kind of things. And I thought I would take the opportunity just to address that a little bit as well, because it is hard to be a young person. I remember myself when I was a young person. When you are young, you still don't feel that you are really in control of your life. You feel that there are other forces around you that are so powerful. And it feels kind of difficult to navigate the world. I remember very well what it was like. And then on top of that, you have all of these pressures on you to succeed in the exams. And maybe your parents tell you, work harder. Yeah, we want to see only A's. These kind of things, or whatever it might be. I don't know exactly what it is like in Sri Lanka, but if it is like it is elsewhere, that's probably the way it is. So usually that's the way the world works. So what can you do to reduce that pressure? And one of the things is to remember that the Dhamma, the teaching of the Buddha, is not just about what happens in your future lives. It is not just about ending rebirth. The Dhamma is also about the life right here and now. If you live well, you increase your enjoyment of existence right here in this life. This is a very important part of this. And as you think about things in the right way, as you focus on the spiritual qualities instead of the worldly qualities, it allows you a different way of dealing with the world that actually reduces suffering right in this very life. The Buddha touches on this in the suttas directly. He talks, in part, he calls it the Dittava Dhamma kamma, the kamma that ripens in this very life because you live well. And so try to think of the Dhamma in that way. Think of the idea of living with kindness and compassion and generosity and all of these things as a way of actually reducing the stress in this life, thinking about things in a new way, adding value from a different place. I was telling people yesterday about a nice way of reducing stress, which I tend to sometimes use. And that is when you have like a deadline. We all have deadlines in our life. One of those classical deadlines is the exams coming up. People get really, really stressed out because they have exams. You can see why. It's really unfair on young people to have these exams. But we all have these kinds of deadlines. We have to write a report. We have a building project we have to finish. Or whatever it is, there are kind of deadlines. And all of these deadlines stresses us out. Why is that? And one of the reasons is because when you look at that exam that you're going to have very soon, all you can see is the exam. The exam fills up your entire horizon. The exam fills up your mental space. The exam is the do-all and be-all and end-all of your life at that particular point. We forget that there is life afterwards. We forget the future beyond the exam, and that is the problem. All we see is the exam. That becomes the focus of our entire existence. And so what we need to do, we need to broaden out our perspective. We need to remember that there is life after the exam. And if you do really well on your exams, okay, your parents are going to praise you. Your parents are going to say, okay, well done, you did really well, okay, good. But that's about it, Is there any more happiness than that? Is that such a big deal? If you do really well on your exam, then you have to do another exam afterwards, which is even more stressful maybe, The better you do, then you have to do your master degree, and then you have to do your PhD maybe afterwards, carrying on like this. Then you get this really high-profile job because you're doing so well, and you're getting really stressed out in your work. So maybe you are successful in one way with your exam, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your life is going to be great afterwards. And what if you do really badly in your exam? Then you can have like a calm government job. A less stressed job working for the government. Okay, your salary is not going to be as high, but you can still enough to get by, enough to live on, right? And you have a calm life where you practice meditation and spiritual values instead. And if you get really, really bad result on the exam, you can always become a monk, And the monk's life is the best of all lives. Seriously. So really, the one who fails the exam, they ultimately get the best results, Because they become a monk or a nun, they get the best deal of everyone else. I'm not suggesting you should fail your exams. I'm just saying that the larger picture is very different from what we think it is. Remember that there is life after the exam. Your life is not determined by what happens in the exam. There are all kinds of things you can do afterwards. Yeah, life is determined by far different factors. You look around the world, I don't think that the wealthiest and the most powerful people are the happiest people in the world. I think the happiest people in the world are often the humble ones, with humble jobs. They're often monastics who live far away in the forest, in Lagala. You know Lagala? Yeah? All the monastics living in Lagala, in the forest jungle right here in Sri Lanka, or whatever. They are often the happiest people. And so we misunderstand what real success is. Real success is something else. There's no point in succeeding externally in terms of your status, in terms of your work, in terms of your grades or whatever, if you fail internally and you have a miserable life. That is pointless. Far more important to succeed internally, and then externally it doesn't matter so much. That is what matters. So remember that. Remember the big picture. And when you remember the big picture, you can de-stress a lot from those exams. And the really weird thing is that if you can de-stress, not taking those exams quite so seriously, usually the result on the exam is better because you are cool about it. Your mind is more clear. You have more mindfulness. You have more focus. More mindfulness means you remember the material you're supposed to remember far better because you are at ease while you're taking those exams. So think a little bit like that, yeah? And apart from that, you have my sympathy because not that that helps you very much, but anyway, you have it anyway, regardless, because I know what it is like to be under such pressure. So we kind of alter our view a little bit. Again, we prioritize the spiritual qualities, the spiritual outlook, and as we do that, it changes how we do things. There's another way to help us reverse the spiritual hierarchy, reverse the value hierarchy, and that is to remember the limitations in the sensual world. The ordinary world of the five senses, all the things that most people enjoy doing. Remember the limitations on that. When you remember those limitations, the spiritual life becomes far more interesting as a consequence. So what are some of those limitations? Well, let me tell you a few similes from the suttas, the way the Buddha explains this. And so one of the kind of great similes of the Buddha is the simile of the dream. When we pursue things in the ordinary world, when we pursue material comforts, we pursue positions in society, status or whatever it is, it's like a dream. It sounds in the dream, it sounds great. I remember when I was a young man, I was always thinking about the kind of job I was going to have, maybe the kind of wife I was going to have, the kind of house. Everything was really perfect in my mind. And this is how I ended up, You can see what a waste of time that was, those dreaming. The reality was so different. But for everyone, it is a bit like that. We have these dreams about what life is going to be like. The reality is always so different. Reality never measures up to the dreams. It is never as good as we think it's going to be. When you are young, you think that when you come to a certain age, you will feel at ease in life. Life will be, you will kind of master life in a certain way. But after a while, you realize you're never going to master life. Life is always going to master you. Life is more powerful. Life is nature. Life always kind of has the final say. And so we have to do things in a different way. So the dream is the problem. The dream makes us pursue things that ultimately are empty and not very fulfilling. So try to see through that dream. Try to understand the underlying reality. Learn from your experiences. We are really bad at learning from experiences. We think the next time it's going to be okay. Okay, you went through one marriage. It was terrible. You then try a second one. That's also terrible. Do you stop getting married? No. Then you go for the third one. This is kind of what it is like. But often the problem is not the person. The problem is just that the nature of relationships is very difficult. It's really hard. That is the real problem very often. So learn rather than trying endlessly, making the same mistake again and again and again. The reason why you're still here is because you made that mistake in the past endlessly. So that is why I'm here as well, by the way. So just we are all in the same kind of, we have the same problem together. So the simile of the dream is a beautiful way of trying to get out of that delusion of the worldly phenomena really being useful for us. Another of my favorite similes is the simile of the borrowed goods that I talk about quite often, actually. And that is to remember that the famous Buddha saying that everything that is dear and pleasing to us must become otherwise, must become separated from us. It's a very harsh kind of reality. It's unpleasant to think about, but we know that it is true. And if you are going to be able to deal with the truth, you have to get used to it, so you have to start thinking about it. Everything that is dear and agreeable to you must become otherwise, must become separated from you. And what that means, the Buddha says, is that we can think of life, all we have in our life, as borrowed goods. We have them for a while, then they have to go. And the Buddha says this in the simile, there is a man, and the man has borrowed a big chariot, and he has borrowed jewelry, and he's driving around like he's some wealthy person, and driving around, and in the city, when he drives around, people say, wow, look at that. That is how the wealthy live their life, And after a while, it kind of gets to you. You really think that you are something special because everyone says you are special, and you start identifying with that wealth. You become that wealthy person. And then soon enough, because you have borrowed these goods, the owners come and they take back their goods. They take away the chariot. They take away that beautiful jewelry you had. These days, they take away your sports car, or whatever it is. And then you feel kind of naked and lost because your entire sense of identity, not only were you starting to attach to those things, but you also identified with those things. It's like those things start to own you rather than you owning them. And that is a scary thing. And so the right way of thinking about things is not that you are the owner, because in the end you are never really the owner. The only thing you own is your karma. Right? That is what the Buddha says you own. All of this other stuff you don't. You have it for a short while, then it gets taken away from you. So are you able to think about your things like that? Are you able to think about your car not as your car, but as a rental car? What it is like to have a rental car compared to owning a car? It's a different mindset, right? You think about it in a different way. What is it like to have a rented apartment compared to owning an apartment? Again, it's a different kind of mindset. So if you start thinking about everything in your life as borrowed goods, borrowed relationships, things you have for a certain span of time, you loosen those attachments a little bit. And because you loosen those attachments, you are less interested in that world, because the world of borrowed things is far less interesting than the world of owned things. We want to own, we don't want to borrow. And that shifts your focus, because as I just mentioned, the Buddha said, you own your karma. That is what you own. So if you want to pursue ownership, pursue the spiritual path, because that is where you make those things that you own and that you bring with you in the future. So if you want to be a real owner, if you want to have your own apartment in quotation marks, if you want to have your own car in quotation marks, then it is the spiritual path that you should practice. That is what you own. That is what you take with you throughout this life and into future lives as well. It goes with you for a long, long time. Ultimately, you don't even own your karma, because your karma ultimately even wears out. But it's much more of an ownership than all the worldly things. And by thinking like that, you shift your focus away from the world, away from the borrowed things, towards the spiritual path, towards the things that you truly own. And this is the beautiful thing that happens in this particular way of thinking about things. The final kind of simile which talks about the sensual world compared to the spiritual path is another nice simile that the Buddha uses in the suttas is the simile of the dog and the bone. And it is the simile of the dog that goes to a butcher shop. And dog is kind of sitting outside the butcher shop, waiting for the butcher to throw it some meat or something, or throw him whatever. But the butcher never throws any meat to a dog. Yeah, the meat is way too valuable to the butcher for it to throw it to the dog. That is not the way the butchers work. And so the butchers kind of takes off all the meat, and when all the meat is kind of put to one side for sale or whatever, then it looks at the bone, okay, this bone has no value to me, so it chucks the bone out to the dog. But the bone doesn't have any meat on it. All the bone has is a bit of blood, the blood smeared on that bone. And then the dog gets this bone, it chews the bone, it gets the taste of the blood, and then it gets even more hungry. Yeah, it was hungry enough before, now it gets the taste. But there's no sustenance there. There's no real meal in that blood. All there is the taste of meat. And so the dog is even more hungry, but then doesn't get any real sustenance, so it runs off to the next butcher shop. The next butcher, just as stingy as the previous butcher. Yeah, this simile is based on the idea that all butchers are really stingy. Yeah, that's kind of how this. If you think the butcher is generous, the simile doesn't work. So this is a stingy butcher simile here. So next butcher does exactly the same. The dog gets the bone. Yeah, nothing really changes. The craving is there. The craving increases because of the taste of the blood. And on and on and on that dog goes from butcher shop to butcher shop, craving never being satisfied, until finally the dog dies in the middle of sitting outside the butcher shop. Then the dog dies, gets reborn as a puppy. Its mother takes the puppy where? To the butcher shop. And on it goes in this kind of cycle. It's kind of a slightly grim and unpleasant simile. But this is basically what human existence is like. Always pursuing things, never finding satisfaction. Those worldly phenomena are never going to satisfy you. And the reason why they're not going to satisfy you is that you are not solving the root problem. The root problem is a sense of emptiness inside, feeling incomplete. Yeah, that's what craving is about. Craving is the feeling that something is missing. And so we crave for things to be complete within us. But that completeness within cannot be found through external means, by finding satisfaction in the sensual realm, or by becoming well-liked or having a high position in society or whatever. These things are never going to fill the hole within. There is another way to fill the hole within, and that is the path of meditation. That is the spiritual path. Because when you practice spiritual qualities, they have a different feeling to them. When you do an act of generosity and you feel good about having done an act of generosity, that happy feeling that you have doesn't come with craving. It's actually devoid of craving. It's a kind of happiness that is the opposite of the worldly happiness. You're feeling a sense of peace coming with that kind of happiness. And then you develop that spiritual happiness by being kind, by being compassionate, by having metta for everyone, developing it and developing and developing it. Then one day you sit down to meditate. You get into a deep state of meditation, a state of meditation where maybe you enter a samadhi. And for the first time in your life, there is no craving whatsoever. The craving is completely gone. Why? Because you feel complete within. You have so much joy, so much happiness, so much meaning, so much tranquility within that you feel complete for the first time. There's no sense of any further need. There's no sense of emptiness. You feel complete as a person. This is what the spiritual path does to you. This is the right view of why the spiritual path matters so enormously. It is the only place where you can find this sense of completion, the sense of meaning. This is meaning for you, because when there is nowhere else to go, it means you have found the full meaning of life. And that is what the spiritual path promises. Can anything promise you more than that?
The answer, of course, is no. If you can discover the meaning of life for Buddhist practice, there is no higher thing to be found, because that is the goal of this existence, finding the ultimate meaning. And when there's nowhere more to go, because there's no craving, you have found that meaning. And this is what this promises. So understand the downside of worldly pleasures. Understand that they never really give satisfaction. They're like a dream that never comes true, a dream that always disappoints. They are like borrowed goods that you will always lose them eventually, and then you are left empty-handed. You can see the struggle, the despair that is involved with worldly pleasures. And some of you will have seen those struggles and that despair in your life already. When a loved one dies, when someone gets sick, when you lose an important possession, whatever it might be, you have seen that. And that, of course, is very problematic. And when you think like that, the mind gently shifts towards the spiritual path, away from the worldly path. It makes you a better person as a consequence. And this is how you develop the mind in this particular way. So, another reason why the spiritual path is so important is because the spiritual path promises you an enormous amount of happiness. I think one of the dangers in Buddhism is that we talk too much about dukkha. Yeah, sometimes when you travel around the world, you say you are a Buddhist, they say, oh, you're that pessimistic person, yeah, always talking about dukkha, 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 dukkha. But actually, when you read the word of the Buddha, you realize that so much of his Dhamma is not about dukkha, but about sukha. And the reason why there is this problem is because understanding dukkha, suffering, is actually very profound. This is the viewpoint from the Buddha. When the Buddha says everything is dukkha, it comes from a very high level. And most people, we cannot really appreciate that and understanding from that point of view. So we have to understand it more from an ordinary point of view. And from an ordinary point of view, the spiritual path is full of happiness. It's a very, very beautiful path. Every stage of the path, every time you do something that is truly spiritual and wise, you will feel a corresponding degree of happiness within you. That is what this path is about. The Buddha talks about this, especially for meditation. And for meditation, he says that once you have the foundational aspects in place, then the rest of the path is just one happiness after another, one degree of peace after another, stage after stage, developing the mind in the right way, deeper and deeper. The typical way this is explained in the suttas is that if you are a virtuous person, deeply virtuous, then you have no regrets. If you have no regrets, you feel joy within, pamujja in Pali. Once you feel the joy within, that develops into the piti, the priti, the rapture that you can feel in deep meditation. When you have the rapture, you develop that further, it leads to passaddhi, the deep sense of tranquility when you're sitting in the meditation and you don't want to move at all. You become like a rock, solid like a rock, sitting in meditation. That solidity like a rock, when you are really completely at ease and peaceful, leads to a profound degree of happiness or bliss called sukha in the Pali Suttas. And that sukha, in turn, leads to samadhi. Samadhi is one of the highest kinds of bliss you can experience as a human being. Bliss, unification of the mind, non-duality, a sense of meaning, a sense of reality that you have never had before. That is what samadhi promises you on this path. You feel more real, more happy, more contented, more meaningful than any other experience in your life. Now, if you listen to that sequence of things, it is all incredibly positive. Joy, rapture, tranquility, bliss, samadhi, which can be called stillness maybe. It's all incredibly blissful. That is what the Buddha promises you if you practice in the right way. This is what meditation is all about. Mindfulness is just the beginning. Mindfulness is only the start of this. And all of these other things, they emerge out of that. This is the right view of meditation. So don't practice the painful path. If you practice the painful path, the Buddha said, you are practicing the inferior path. The happy path is superior to the painful path. Why? Because it is happy. That is the only reason why it is superior. Isn't that great? We all want to be happy. So for that reason, the happy path is by definition superior to the painful path. And this is what the Buddha promises every one of you if you practice in the right way. The most meaningful, the most powerful thing that can be experienced by a human being. Bliss upon bliss upon bliss. This is what meditation is about. And if you do that, if you practice in this way, then one day you may achieve samadhi. And achieving samadhi is a bit like your mind being lifted out of the world. It's like your mind being filled with helium gas, filling up that helium balloon, and you rising up into the air, getting the bird's eye view below, seeing the world properly for the first time. There is a beautiful simile, another simile in the suttas. There are so many beautiful similes in the suttas. But there's a simile of two friends. They are walking along and they come to a mountain or a hill. And one of the friends goes up to the top of the hill, whereas the other friend is too lazy, so he stays at the bottom. So he stays at the bottom, the other one goes to the top. And when he goes to the top of the hill, he looks out and he shouts down to his friend below, and he says, you won't believe it. From the top of the hill, I can see so many beautiful things. I can see beautiful ponds, beautiful meadows, beautiful lakes, forest, everything from the top of the hill. And the fellow at the root of the hill, at the bottom of the hill, says, no way, I don't believe a single word of what you're saying. You're just talking rubbish standing at the top of the hill. And so the fellow at the top of the hill, he gets a bit exasperated. I'm standing here seeing all of these things, and my friend below says it's not true. What is he talking about? This ignorant fool. So he goes down to the bottom of the hill, and he grabs his friend, drags him to the top of the hill, and he says, look, what do you see? Oh yeah, I guess you were right. Yeah, I can see nice lakes, nice forests, nice meadows. So you were right. The top of the hill signifies samadhi. When you come to the top of the hill, emerging from the five sense world, you can see things from the bird's eye view for the first time. You can see what is really there from a higher kind of perspective. You understand reality. You understand what life really is about. You understand impermanence. You understand suffering. And you understand non-self. And what you see is very beautiful. You see beautiful forests, beautiful meadows. Someone who is enlightened is a very happy person. What you see is beauty in this way. Yeah, that is what it means to be enlightened. The person on top of the hill is like the Buddha. The Buddha is trying to pull us up. He said, come with me. Come up, see the truth. No, we don't want to see. I want to be at the bottom of the hill. I don't want to come up to the hill. They work too hard to walk to the top of the hill. That's what people are like. They're clinging on to the base of the mountain, refusing to go up. It is like that famous story. I'm not sure where it is found. I think it is found in one of the it's one of the stories in Buddhism, maybe the Jatakas or whatever, maybe Dhammapada Atthakatha, I'm not sure. And it's the story of the worm and the deva. There's two friends, they both die. One gets reborn in the heavenly realm. One gets reborn as a worm in a load of dung. Yeah, you know that story? So the deva, sees his friend being reborn as a reborn as a worm in a load of dung. It's getting late now. My mind is kind of getting a bit hard to say the right thing here. And so he has compassion for his friend. Oh, poor friend being reborn in the dung. What a terrible kind of thing. Let me go down and help my friend out of the dung. And so he says to his friend, the worm, oh, please, let me help you out of the dung. and the worm in the dung says, "Get lost, I don't want to have anything to do with you, go away. My dung is so nice, the dung is nice and warm, and I can eat it. Yeah, there's so much to eat, there's such a large part of dung. Wow, this is my home, I want to stay here forever. Get lost, Deva. I don't want to have anything to do with Devaloka. Is there any dung in Devaloka? No? Okay, then in that case, forget about it. No way I'm going to go to Devaloka." And so the worm holds on to the dung, and the Deva tries desperately to free him, to make him see that actually there is something far better in the world. But the worm refuses. The worm is very slippery because the dung is slippery. And every time the Deva is able to grab hold of him, the worm kind of slithers away and back into the dung again. And eventually the Deva has to give up. The worm has to stay in the dung and has to live out its karma, because that is what happens to worms that are stupid, and it stays on in that dung. And of course, the simile is that most of us, we are little worms in our pile of dung. We're clinging on to the dung, the dung of life. Oh, it is so beautiful. We have all of these nice, wonderful things, and this dung, no, hold on to the dung. Even though the Buddha says it is possible to climb the hill, climb to the top of the mountain, and get this beautiful view, the beautiful reality, make an end of all problems. Even though that is possible, we hold on and we grasp on to the inferior world, a world that ultimately leads to so much suffering and so many problems. So my message to you is to come out of the dung. Are you ready to come out of the dung? First of all, you have to recognize the dung. You have to see the problem. You have to contemplate that the way that the Buddha talks about the world, understand that it is inherently flawed, that the world, there's always conflict. In the world, there's always problems. In the world, there's no stability. Every time you grieve and you get sad because there's another war started, another conflict is brewing somewhere, it is because of the dung of the world. That is the nature of the world. Understand its nature. Don't grieve over it. Understand that that is the way it has to be because of human defilements, because of human shortcomings. And then gradually you can emerge from that world because you see the world in the right way. You have a right view about the nature of the world and right view about the nature of the spiritual path. And then you emerge and you have an opportunity to see the world from a different vantage point, from the vantage point of the top of the hill, where you fully, for the first time, understand the nature of existence and also the nature of the escape from that existence. So that is what I wish for every one of you. And I wish it for myself as well, actually, because it's a positive thing to wish for oneself. And so please carry on, do the right thing, live well, and coming back to the one thing that is more important than anything else, the one thing to take away from this talk, and also from the talk this morning, be a kind person. Be kind in body, be kind in speech, be kind in thought, be kind in your meditation, be generous, be forgiving, do all the kind things. And if you can lodge that into your mind in a powerful way, if you can do that one thing all the time with commitment, with perseverance, you're going to go a very, very long way on this spiritual path. So that is my message to you. I'm now going to pass the microphone over to my friend Venerable Dhammita, who's going to give you a translation, and then we will come back and do a metta meditation later on to finish off the day here. So that is it for now.
So we will ask him to wait. We'll have the Sinhala translations in a few minutes.
හොඳයි එහෙමනම් පරිවර්තනයට සූදානම්. නමෝ තස්ස භගවතෝ අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස. නමෝ තස්ස භගවතෝ අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස. නමෝ තස්ස භගවතෝ අරහතෝ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස. ගෞරවනීය ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලාගේ අවසරයි, ගෞරවනීය මෙහෙණින් වහන්සේ, ශ්‍රද්ධාවන්ත ගිහි පින්වතුනි, අද පොහේ වැඩසටහනේ බණ්ඩාරනායක සම්මන්ත්‍රණ ශාලාවේ පූජ්‍ය අජාන් බ්‍රහ්මාලි ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ විසින් මෙහෙවන ලද පොහේ වැඩසටහනේ සවස් භාගයේ ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ විසින් කරන ලද ඒ දේශනාවේ සිංහල පරිවර්තනයටයි දැන් සූදානම් වෙන්නේ. එතකොට ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ ඒ උදෑසන ඒ දේශනා කරපු ආකාරයට ඒ සම්මා දිට්ඨිය පිළිබඳව තවදුරටත් දේශනාව කරගෙන ගියා. එතකොට මෙතනදී දැන් ඒ අපි ඊට පෙර ඒ සිදු වෙච්ච සාකච්ඡාවට අදාළව සාන්නාසේ යම් කාරණා ටිකක් කිව්වා. එතකොට දැන් මේ භාවනාව සහ ඒ භාවනාවේ තියෙන ඒ ප්‍රතිඵල සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඒ විද්‍යාත්මක ඒ කරන හැදෑරීමේදී ඒකෙදී දැන් විද්‍යාත්මකව බලද්දී ඒ භාවනාව කියන එක පාවිච්චි කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ ඒ භාවනාවෙන් තවත් යමක්කට යන්න, තව දෙයක් ලබා ගන්න. තව ඊළඟ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් ඊළඟ ආකාරයක දෙයක් ලබා ගන්න වගේ අදහසක් එතන තියෙනවා. හැබැයි බෞද්ධ සංකල්පයේ හැටියට බුදුහාඳුරෝ දේශනා කරන විදිහට බෞද්ධයෙක් භාවනා කරද්දී භාවනා කරන්න ඕනේ. දේවල් ඒ භාවනාවෙන් දේවල් අවසන් වෙනවා. නැවත කිව්වොත් ඒ විදිහේ ඒ සාමාන්‍ය ඒ විදිහේ විද්‍යාත්මක ආකල්පයෙන් ඒ විදිහට භෞතිකවාදී ආකල්පයෙන් දේවල් ලබා ගන්න කැමති වෙන ස්වභාවයේ ආකල්පයෙන් භාවනාව කරද්දී භාවනාව අපි කරන්නේ ඒ භාවනාව පාවිච්චි කරලා තවත් දෙයක් ලබා ගන්න. ඒ වුණාට පිරිසුදු ඒ සම්මා දිට්ඨියට අනුව අපි භාවනා කරන්නේ ඒ භාවනා කිරීම තුළින්ම අපි ඒ මාර්ගයේ කෙලවරට පැමිණෙනවා. තවත් දෙයක් ලබා ගන්න නෙමෙයි භාවනා කරන්නේ. භාවනාවම ඇවිල්ලා අවසානයේ ඒකේ කෙලවර නැත්තම් ප්‍රතිඵලය කියලා ඒ විදිහට කාරණයක් සිහිපත් කරා. එතකොට මෙතනදී භාවනාව කියන දේ ඒක ස්වභාවික ක්‍රියාවලියක් කියන එක ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ කිව්වා. ඒක ඇවිල්ලා ආර්ය අෂ්ටාංගික මාර්ගයේ කොටසක්. එතනදී අපි උත්සාහ කරන්නේ ඊතා ඉවසීමෙන් හේතු ප්‍රත්‍ය සකසා දෙමින් හේතු ප්‍රත්‍ය රැස් කරලා දෙමින් අපි ඉවසීමෙන් අපේ ප්‍රතිපදාව කරගෙන යනවා. එතකොට මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය ඉදිරියට සිදු වෙනවා. එහෙම අදහසක් තමයි මෙතන භාවනාව කියලා කිව්වම අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ කියන එක කිව්වා. ඒක හරියට උපමාවක් ස්වානස දැක්ුවේ අපි වාහනයක යද්දී අපි රියදුර අසුනේද ඉන්නේ නැත්නම් පසුපස අසුනක මගී අසුනකද ඉන්නේ කියන එක අනුව අපි යන ගමන අපිට වෙනස් වෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. රියදුර අසුනක ඉන්නවා කියන එක අපි දේවල් පාලනය කරනවා. අපි හිතනවා අපි තමයි පාලකයා මේ වාහනේ එලවන්නේ අපි කියලා. හැබැයි සැබෑ විදියට භාවනාව දියුණු වෙන කාරණය උපමාවකට දක්වන්නේ හරියට අර පසුපස ආසනයක ඉඳගෙන මේ ගමන යනවා වගේ. පාලනය කිරීමක් කරන්නේ නැහැ. හේතු ප්‍රත්‍ය රැස් කරනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ බස් එකට නගිනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒ වාහනේ ඒ විදියට ගමන් ගන්නවා. එතනදී ඒ ආත්ම සංඥාව කියන එක දුර වෙන ආකාරයට මේ කාරණා සිදු වෙන්න ඕන කියන එක සිහිපත් කරා. එතනදී ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා දැන් භාවනා කිරීම ගැන කතා කරද්දී දැන් ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් මේ කාරණා කියද්දී උන්වහන්සේ පාවිච්චි කර වචනේ ඇවිල්ලා ફોકસ කියන පදේ. අපි දේවල් වලට ફોકસ කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ ඒක අර පාලනයක් කියන දෙයක් එතන හඟවනවා. අපි තමයි මෙතන පාලකයා. එතකොට ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ කිව්වා ફોકસ කියන පදේ නැත්තම් ඇත්තම concentration කියන පදේ ඊළඟ කිව්වේ. concentration කියන පදේ ඇවිල්ලා එච්චර හොඳ පරිවර්තනයක් නෙමෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ සමාධියට නැත්තම් භාවනාවට අපි සාමාන්‍ය පරිවර්තනය කරන්න පාවිච්චි කරනවා. එතකොට ආනාපාන සති සූත්‍රය වගේ සූත්‍රයක් බලපුවාම සාන්නාසේ දැක්කුවා ඒ සූත්‍රවල අපිට පෙන්වන්නේ වෙන විදිහක තේරුමක්. ආනාපාන සති සූත්‍රයේදී පෙන්වන්නේ ඔබ සතිමත් භාවයේ පිහිටවා ගන්නවා. සතිමත් භාවයේ පිහිටවා ගත්තට පස්සේ ඒක තමයි පළවෙනිම කරන දේ. ඒ පරිමුඛං සතෙන් උපට්ඨපෙත්වා කියලා ස්වර්ණාසේ ප්‍රශ්න වලටත් උත්තර දුන්නා ඉස්සෙල්ලා. එතකොට සතිය කියන එක මේ විදිහට පිහිටවාගෙන එයින් පස්සේ සතියෙන් යුතුව හුස්ම ඉහළට ගන්නවා හුස්ම පහළට හෙලනවා කියන දේ බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා. සතෝව අස සති සතෝ පස සති කියලා ස්වානස කිව්ව ඒ කාරණේ. එතකොට මෙතන යම් කිසි බලයක් යෙදීමක් එහෙම තේරුමක් මෙතනදී අපිට ගන්න නැහැ. මෙතන තියෙන්නේ හොදෙක් ඔබ සතිමත් වෙනවා විතරයි. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන හිඳිනවා වගේ ස්වභාවයක් විතරයි කියලා කිව්වා. ඒක තව උපමාවක් ස්වානස් දැක්කුවා. දැන් ඒ සනසේ මේ භාවනා වැඩසටහන් වලට ඉස්සෙල්ලා ඒ රිටිගල වැඩපු ගමනේදී ස්වානාසේ කැලේ ඇතුලෙන් ඇවිදගෙන යද්දී ස්වානාසේ කිව්වේ ඒ කැලේ තියෙන ඒ ගස් පිහිටලා තියෙන හැටි, ඒ තියෙන සාන්ත භාවය, ඒ අතුපතර වැවිලා තියෙන ගස්, ඊළඟට ඒ තියෙන ඒ කොළපාට ස්වභාවය, ඒ නටබුන් ආදිය එක්ක ඒක විඳ ගන්නවා මිසක් අපි ඒ වගේ තැනකට ගියාම එකපාරටම ගහකට අපි අපේ අවධානය යොමු කරන්නේ නැහැ. අපි බලෙන් ගහක් දිහා බලන්නේ නැහැ. අපි පොදුවේ මේ මොහොතේ මේ මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ කියන ඒ අත්දැකීම විඳ ගැනීමක් තමයි අපි කරන්නේ. ස්වානාසේ ඒකට ඒ කාරණයට සමකලා මේ හුස්ම දිහා බලන කාරණෙත්. එතකොට ඔබ හුස්මත් එක්ක ඉන්නේ. එතකොට ඒ විදිහට අපි හරියට හුස්ම දිහා බලන්න ඕනේ කියන එක ස්වානාස සිහිපත් කරා. ඒක අර පාලනය කරන නැත්නම් ඒ විදිහට කොන්සන්ට්‍රේට් කියන පදය හැංගෙන ආකාරයට ඒ විදිහට ඒක බලයෙන් ඒක අවධානය දෙන්න යන්නේ නැතුව. එතකොට ඔහොම කරගෙන යද්දී හුස්මේ තියෙන ඒ සුඛ ස්වභාවය, ඒකේ තියෙන සුබ ලකුණු, සුබ සංඥාවන්, ඒකේ තියෙන හොඳ පැත්ත, හුස්මේ තියෙන හොඳ පැත්ත, ඒක ටිකෙන් ටික දකින්න පටන් ගන්නවා. ඒක අපි දියුණු කරනවා. ඒකේ තියෙන හොඳ පැත්ත දකිනවා. සුබ සංඥාව වඩනවා කියලා අපිට ඒ සූත්‍රයට අනුව කියන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට අපි මෙතන තදින් උත්සාහ කිරීමක් නෙමෙයි කරන්නේ. අපි බලා ඉන්නවා හුදෙක් සහ අපි ඒ සංඥාවන් වෙනස් කරනවා. ඒකම අපි මේකේ සතුට විඳින්න පටන් ගන්නවා කියලා කිව්වා. සමහර ලාවට ස්වාමීනාසට හම්බෙලා තියනවා කියලා කිව්වා. සමහර භාවනා යෝගින් ස්වාමීනාසට කියලා තියෙනවා කවදාවත් ආයෙනම් භාවනා වැඩසටහනකට යන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. මොකද හේතුව ඒ සමහර භාවනා ඒ වාර ඒ වැඩසටහන් වලදී ඒ විඳලා තියෙන කායික දුක් පීඩා නිසා ඒ ඉඳගෙන ඉඳලා තේ ආදී වශයෙන් කර භාවනාව බල කරලා වගේ. ඒක නිසා ඒකත් එක්ක තියෙන වේදනාවන් නිසා සමහර අය භාවනාව ඉක්මනින් අත්හරිනවා කියලා කිව්වා. මෙතනදී අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ කාරණේ තමයි භාවනාව කියන එක ඇවිල්ලා ධර්මතාවයක් විතරයි. එතකොට මේක ඇවිල්ලා ස්වභාව ධර්මයේ කොටසක්. අපිට බෑ ස්වභාව ධර්මයට බල කරන්න කියලා කිව්වා. ඒක ඇවිල්ලා ස්වභාවික ක්‍රියාවලියක්. ඔබ ස්වභාවික ක්‍රියාවලියට බල කරන්න ගියොත්, බලපෑම් කරන්න ගියොත් ඒ දේ අවුල් වෙන එක, විනාශ වෙන එක තමයි වෙන්නේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඊන් පස්සේ ස්වාමීනාසේ උපමා කතාවක් දැක්කුවා. ඒ පොඩි ළමයෙකුට අම්මා දෙනවා සූර්යකාන්ත මල් වල ඇට පොතේ මේක පැල කරන්න කියලා. ඒ ළමයා ඒක පස් වලට යට කරලා ඊට පස්සේ වතුර අම්මා කිව්ව විදිහට වතුර දාලා ඒ විදිහට ඊට පස්සේ දැන් හැමදාම ඇවිල්ලා බලනවා කො මේකේ මොකක්වත් වෙනසක් තියනවද? ඒතර අම්මන්ට කිව්වහම මේක පැලවෙලා නැහැ තාම කියලා. ඒතර අම්මා කියනවා ඉවසන්න පොඩ්ඩක්. ඕක බලන් ඉන්නකෝ ඕක එනවා කියලා. ඉතින් කොහොම හරි ඉවසලා ඊට පස්සේ ඔන්න එකපාරටම ඒ අංකුරයක් පොළවෙන් මතුවෙනවා. ඔහොම මතුවුනහම ඉතින් සතුටුයි ඒකට. ඊට පස්සේ ඉතින් ආයෙත් ඒක දිහා බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා. මේක ලොකු වෙන්නේ කවදද කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ මේක ඒ විදිහට ඉතින් ලොකු වෙන්නේ නැහැ වගේ. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා මේ ළමයා කරන වැඩේ ඉන්න මම පැලේට උදව් කරන්නම් කියලා ඒක ඇදලා ඒක ලොකු කරන්න හදනවා. එතකොට අපි දන්නවා මොකද්ද එතනදී පැලේට වෙන්නේ කියලා. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා ඒ දරුවා උත්සාහ කරේ ඒ පැලේට උදව් කරන්න. අන්තිමට උදව් කරලා උනේ ඒ පැලේ නැති වෙන එක, විනාශ වෙන එකයි එතන උනේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා ඒ වගේ අර පොඩි ළමෙක් වෙන්න එපා කියලා කිව්වා අපිට. මොකද මේ දේවල් ස්වභාවිකව යන්න ඕන ක්‍රියාවලියක්. මේ දේවල් වැඩ කරන්නේ හේතු ප්‍රත්‍යයන් වලට අනුවයි. එහෙම නැතුව අපේ බලාපොරොත්තු අපේ චේතනා කිරීම වලට අනුව මේ භාවනාව දුවන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ස්වභාවික ක්‍රියාවලිය වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ කියලා ඒ විදිහට දැක්වුවා. ඒකයි බුද්ධ ධර්මයේ කියන්නේ. ඒ බුද්ධ ධර්මය ඇවිල්ලා හේතුඵල ධමයක් කියලා. හේතුන් රැස් කරපුවාම තමයි නිසි ප්‍රතිඵල ලැබෙන්නේ. වෙන ආකාරයකින් අපි ප්‍රතිඵල ලබන්න බල කරලා ඒ විදිහට ලබන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් එතනදී මූලික අපි රැස් කළ යුතු හේතුවක් විදියට සීලය කියන එක දක්වා. ඒක ඇවිල්ලා මූලිකවම හේතුවක් විදියට සිහිපත් කරා. එතකොට ටිකෙන් ටික මේ විදියට ඒ සීලය තුළින් ඒ හිතේ තියෙන පිරිසුදු භාවය ඊළඟට අර විදියට භාවනාව තුළින් ලබන ඒ සතුට එක්ක මේ මාර්ගය කියන එක ටිකෙන් ටික අපිට වැඩෙනවා. අපේ භාවනාව ටිකෙන් ටික පහසු වෙනවා. ඉතින් ওই විදිහට කියලා ස්වාමීන් ඇහුවා කාට හරි මෙතන තියනවද කියලා ඇහුවා භාවනා කරද්දී හිතන ප්‍රශ්නයක් මෙතන කාට හරි තියනවද කියලා ඇහුවා. ඉතින් අපි ඔක්කොට මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන නිසා ඊට පස්සේ ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ කිව්වා ඊන් පස්සේ ඉතින් ඒකට හේතුව මෙන්න මේකයි. අපි ලෝකේ දකින විදිහ තියෙන අඩුපාඩු නිසා තමයි මේ විදිහට අපිට හිතවිලි එන්නේ ඕනට වඩා කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට අපි වටිනාකම් දෙන්නේ මොනවටද? අපි සැබෑ වටිනාකම් දෙන්නේ මොනවටද ලෝකේ? නැත්තම් මොනවටද අපි හරියටම අගයන්නේ මොකක්ද? ලෝකේ තියෙන දේවල්ද? නැත්තම් සතිය, සමාධිය වගේ දේවල්ද? භාවනාවටද අපි වටිනාකම දෙන්නේ? සීලයටද වටිනාකම දෙන්නේ? ඒ අනුව තමයි මේ කාරණේ ඒ අනුව තමයි සකස් වෙන්නේ කියලා කිව්වා. අපි මේ විදිහට ඒ පරිබාහිර දේවල් වලට ඒ වටිනාකම් දෙනවා නම් ඒ පරිබාහිර දේවල් තමයි ඔළුවට එන්නේ. ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් හිතවිලි පහළ වෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ වුණොත් සතිමත් භාවයට, ඒ සාන්ත භාවයට, සමාධි භාවයට අපි වටිනාකමක් දෙනවා නම් අපිට පහසුවෙන් ටිකෙන් ටික ඒ දේවල් වලට සංසිඳෙන්න, තැම්පත් වෙන්න උපකාරී වෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. මෙතනදී ස්වාමීන් නැවතත් සිහිපත් කරා මතක තියාගන්න කියලා කිව්වා. මොකක්ද ඇත්තටම වටින්නේ මේ ලෝකේ කියලා? ලෝකෙ දිහා බලපුවාම ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා විසඳන්න කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳලා ඉවරයක් කරන්න බැරි දේවල් කියලා කිව්වා. ඒතර අපිට මෙච්චර කාලයක් අපි සංසාරෙත් ආවේ මේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන්න දරපු උත්සාහය එක්ක කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් ආපහු ගිහිල්ලා ඊළඟ ජීවිතේදීත් අපි කරන්නේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන එක කියලා කිව්වා. මේ පුරුද්ද අපි අත්හැරියේ නැත්තම්. එතකොට ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන්නේ ඇයි? අපි ප්‍රශ්න විසඳීම තුළින් සතුට හොයන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා, අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා මේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳුනොත් එතකොට මට සතුටක් තියෙයි. එතකොට මගේ මේ ප්‍රශ්න හරියයි කියලා. හැබැයි ඇත්ත තත්ත්වය ඇවිල්ලා එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඉවරුනාම තව ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා විසඳන්න. ඒ ප්‍රශ්න වල විසඳීමේ කෙලවරක් ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන එක ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ විදිහට ප්‍රශ්න විසඳලා සතුට හොයනට වඩා සතුට හොයන්න වෙන ක්‍රමයක් තියෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඒක තමයි ඒ අර ආධ්‍යාත්මික මාර්ගය අපි ගන්න. ආර්ය අෂ්ටාංගික මාර්ගය ඒ විදිහට වැඩිම. ඊළඟට මෙතනදී අපේ අන්තර්ජාලය හරහා මේ වැඩසටහනට සවන් දෙන ඒ පිරිසක් විශේෂයෙන් ඒ විභාගවලට පෙනී සිටින දරුවෝ අහපු ප්‍රශ්න කීපයකට සම්බන්ධ කරලා ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ ඒ කාරණා කීපයක් මතු කළා. එතනදී ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේට තේරෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා පොඩි කාලේ ළමෙක් විදිහට ඒ ගත කරන ජීවිතේ පහසු නෑ කියලා කිව්වා. ගොඩාක් ඒ ජීවිතේ හරි මගට යනවා කියන එක හරිම අභියෝගාත්මක දෙයක්. ඒක හොඳ නරක තෝරා ගැනීමත් පහසු නෑ අපිට පොඩි කාලේ. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් අපිට ගොඩාක් ඉතින් පීඩන එනවා. විභාග පාස් වෙන්න ඒ විවිධ ආකාරයේ ඒ විදිහේ ජය ගන්න කඩේම් ආදී දේවල් අපිට තියෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් එතනදී අපි මොකක්ද කරන්න පුළුවන් කියන කාරණේ ස්වාමීන් අහලා ඊට පස්සේ සානාසිතින් දැක්ුවා ධර්මයේ අපිට මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් උත්තර තියනවා කියලා කිව්වා. මෙතනදී මූලික අපේ මේ විදිහේ අපි පීඩණයට පත් වෙන නැත්නම් ළමයින්ව පීඩණයට පත් කරන ඒ කාරණාවලට හේතු වෙන නැත්නම් උපකල්පනයක් විදිහට අපි අපේ තියෙන එක්තරා උපකල්පනයක් සවන්නාංශේ පරීක්ෂා කරා. එතකොට එතනදී දැන් අපිට විභාග ආදී දේවල් තියෙනවා. ඒ කිව්වේ ඒ කාරණේ මුලින් කිව්වේ මම හිතන්නේ විභාග සම්බන්ධයෙන් කියද්දි ඊට පස්සේ සාන්නස් කිව්වා මෙහෙම ඔබ හරියට ජීවත් වෙනවා නම් එතකොට මේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට මුහුණ දෙන්න මේ ප්‍රශ්න හරියට අපිට විසඳෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ කිව්වේ අපේ දුක කියන එක ටිකෙන් ටික අඩු වෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. අපේ ඒ ආරම්භයේදීම තියෙන ඒ සමහර වැරදි අදහස් වැරදි උපකල්පන නිසා තමයි මේ අපිට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න තව තවත් උග්‍ර වෙන්නේ කියලා කිව්වා. දැන් අපිට විභාග වගේ දේවල් තියෙනවා. අපිට තියෙන ඩෙඩ්ලයින්ස් කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට ඒ දේවල් හරි කරදරකාරී දේවල්, සමහරවිට අසාධාරණ දේවල්. හැබැයි වෙන විදිහක් නැහැ. ඒ දේවල් වලට අපිට මුහුණ දෙන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක නිසා අපි ආතතියටපත් වෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට අපි විභාගයේදී ගැන කල්පනා කරද්දී අපිට මතක් වෙන විභාගය ගැන විතරමයි. ඒක තමන්ගේ තියෙන ඒ සම්පූර්ණ මානසික අවකාශයේ පුරවලා දානවා මේ විභාගය කියන කාරණෙන්. එතකොට අපිට අමතක වෙනවා විභාගයෙන් පස්සේ මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? නැත්නම් විභාගයට අමතරව ලෝකේ මොනවද තියෙන්නේ? ඒට සමාන්තරව. එන්නේ ඒ පැත්තෙන් හිතන්න ඕනේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපේ දෘෂ්ටි කෝණය වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා කිව්වා. දැන් ඔබ විභාගේ පාස් වුණොත් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ කියලා ඇහුවා. විභාගේ පාස් වුණොත් ගුරුවරු දෙමාපියෝ සතුටටපත් වෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝ කියනවා ලොකු දෙයක් වා හොඳ දෙයක් කරා කියලා. ඉතින් සමහරවිට ඉතින් එච්චරයි. ඒගොල්ලෝ සතුටු වුණා. එච්චරයි. ඊට පස්සේ තව විභාග කරන්න තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ විභාග කරලා ඊට පස්සේ කරන්න තියෙන මොකක්ද? ඊට පස්සේ තියෙන්නේ ලොකු ගාණක් ගෙවන ගොඩාක් ආතතිය ලැබෙන ආකාරයේ ලොකු රැකියාවක් කරන්න වෙනවා. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් සානාස කිව්වා ඉතින් විභාගේ පාස් වුණේ නැත්තම් ඉතින් ඔයාලට පුළුවන් ඕනනම් මේ පොඩි රාජ්‍ය රැකියාවක් වගේ කරන්න කියලා ඒ විදිහට ඉතින් කිව්වා. ඉතින් නැත්තම් ඉතින් බැරි වුණොත් පැවිදි වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒ විදිහට ටිකක් ඒ හාස්‍ය උපදවන්න සානාස උත්සාහ කරලා ඊට පස්සේ සානාස කිව්වා මෙතනදී මම අදහස් කරන්නේ විභාගේ ෆේල් වෙන්න කියන එක නෙමෙයි. ජීවිතේ කියන දේට ගොඩාක් දේවල් තව තියෙනවා. විභාග මේ දේවල් මේ භෞතික වශයෙන් මේ උපයන දේවල් විතරක් නෙමෙයි ලෝකේ තියෙන්නේ කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ඒ සරලව ජීවත් වෙන මිනිස්සු මේ ලෝකේ ඒගොල්ලෝ සතුටෙන් ජීවත් වෙන අය කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට අපි මේ පොළොල් පින්තූරේ තේරුම් ගන්න ඕන කියලා කිව්වා. මේ විදිහට පොළොල් පින්තූරේ තේරුම් ගත්තී මේ විභාගය කියන එක ඇවිල්ලා ලෝක අවසානයේ නෙමෙයි කියලා අපිට තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් වුණොත් මෙතන පොළොල් පින්තූරයක් තියනවා කියලා. එතකොට හොඳයි පාස් වුණොත් එහෙමයි පාස් වුණු නැතත් ඒත් කමක් නැහැ. ඒ වගේ ආකාරයකට හිතාගත්තාම ඒත් හැබැයි විභාගයට පාඩම් කරනවා ඒ දේවල් කරනවා. එතකොට ඔබ අර තියෙන ආතතිය ඔබට අඩුයි. හැබැයි ඔබ විභාගයට ඒ විදිහට මුහුණ දෙනවා. බොහෝ වෙලාවට ඔබ විභාගෙත් පාස් වෙයි කරදරයක් නැතුව කියලා ඒ විදිහට සෝන්නාසේ ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් සිටිය යුතු ආකාරය දැක්වුවා. ඉතින් ඊට අමතරව ඊට පස්සේ සෝන්නාසේ තවත් ඉදිරියට ගියා දේශනාවේ අපි වටිනාකම් දීමේ ඒ පිළිවෙල ඒ අනුපිළිවෙලේ වෙනස්කම් කොහොමද කරන්නේ කියන එක. ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි කොහොමද අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ කියලා අහලා ඒ විදිහට දක්වලා සාන්නාස දුන්නා උපමාවකයක් බුදුහාඳුරු දක්වලා තියෙනවා. ඒක උපමාවක් තමයි මේ දේවල් මේ ලෝකේ තියෙන දේවල් හරියට නිකන් සිහින විදිහට හිතීම. දැන් අපි මේ විදිහට මේ දේවල් පස්සේ යන දේවල් ඔක්කොම මේ අපි ලබා ගන්න ඒ ධනය ඊළඟට ඒ බලය ඊළඟට ඒ විවිධාකාරයේ කීර්ති ප්‍රශංසා නම්බුනාම මේ දේවල් ඔක්කොම හේනයක් විදිහට හිතන්න කියලා කිව්වා. මොකද දැන් අපි මේ දේවල් දැන් ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා ස්වාමීන් ගිහි කාලේ ඒ පොඩි කාලේ හිතුවලු මම ලොකු වුණාම මෙන්න මෙහෙම වෙනවා කියලා. අන්තිමට පැවිදිලා තමන් අතරුනේ අර හිතපු එකත් අපරාධ කියලා ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒක අපි ඔක්කොම කරන දෙයක් කියලා කිව්වා. ඇත්ත తත්වයේ ඊට වඩා වෙනස් වෙන්නේ හැම වෙලාවෙම. අනාගතය කියන එක අවිනිශ්චිතයි. අපි හිතනවා අපි තමයි මේ ජීවිතේ පාලකයා කියලා. ඇත්තටම අවසානයේදී අපිට පෙන්වලා දෙන ජීවිතය තමයි අපේ පාලකයා. එතකොට ජීවිතය ඇවිල්ලා ඒක පාලනය කරනවා. අපි ජීවත් වෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක එයා තමයි තීරණය කරන්න කියලා කිව්වා. ඊළඟ උපමාවක් දැක්වුවා හරියට මේ දේවල් ලෝකේ තියෙන දේවල් ඇත්තටම ඉල්ලාගත් දේවල් වගේ කියලා. එතකොට එතනදී දැන් බුද්ධ වචනයක් තියෙනවා ඒ හැම ඒ දෙයක්ම ලෝකේ මට කැමති ඒ දේවල් මට අත්හැරලා දාන්න වෙනවා මට කවදා හරි ඒවයින් වෙන් වෙන්න වෙනවා කියලා. ඒක තමයි ඇත්ත తත්වය කියලා සානස කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ අපි අයත් කරගෙන ඉන්න අපි ලං කරගෙන තියෙන දේවල් ඒ ඔක්කොම ඇවිල්ලා කවදා හරි දාලා යන්න වෙනවා. ඒ දේවල් හරියට ඉල්ලගත්ත දේවල් වගේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඊන් පස්සේ දැන් තව උපමා ආදී දේවල් දුන්නා. ඒත් වෙලාව හැටියට මට මේක ටිකක් කෙටි කරන්න වෙනවා වගේ. එතකොට ඊන් පස්සේ දැක්ුවා හිතන්න කියලා කිව්වා කාර් එකක් Taman අයිති කාර්යත්වයේ තියාගෙන පාවිච්චි කරන එකයි ඒක කුලියට අරගෙන රෙන්ටල් විදියට පාවිච්චි කරන එක අතර වෙනස. එහෙම ගත්තාම අපි ඒ කාර් එක පාවිච්චි කරනවා. අපි රෙන්ට් කරපුවාම කුලියට ගත්තාම. හැබැයි ඒක සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි ගොඩාක් වද වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දුක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අර කාර් එකක් අයිති කරන් ඉන්නවා වගේ කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ දේවල් ඇත්තටම අපිට අයිති නැහැ කියන සංඥාව වඩන එක වැදගත් භාවයේ ස්වාමීන් කිව්වා. ඊන් පස්සේ තවත් කාරණයක් සිහිපත් කරා කර්මය කැමති නම් හිතා ගන්න කියලා කිව්වා. කර්මය තමයි අපිට අයිති තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපි හොඳ දේවල් වැඩි වර්ධනය කරගත්තොත් ධර්ම මාර්ගයේ යමින් ඒකේ අයිතිකාරත්වය අපිට තියෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. ඒක අපිට ගොඩාක් කාලයක් හිතසුව පිණිස හේතු වෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. හැබැයි ඉතින් කර්මයක් කාලයක් යද්දී ඒකත් ගෙවිල ඉවර වෙනවා. ඊන් පස්සේ අර සුනකෙක් අර මස් නැති ලේ තවරිච්ච ඇට කැබල්ල හපන ඒ උපමාව කිව්වා. ඒ සතාට ඒ ඇට කැබල්ලක් ලැබෙනාම ඒක හපනවා. ඒක ඇත්තටම එයාගේ බඩගින නෙවෙන්නෙත් නෑ. එයාගේ තණ්හාව ඒ තියෙන බඩගින තව වැඩි වීම විතරයි ඒකෙන් වෙන්නේ කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් මේ ලෝකේ තියෙන දේවල් ඒ වගේ කියලා කිව්වා. කවදාවත් ලැබුණාට ඒක ඉවර වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා කිව්වා. අපි දෙයක් ඒ විදිහට තණ්හාවේ ස්වභාවය ඇවිල්ලා අපි දේවල් පස්සේ යවනවා. හැබැයි ඒ දේ ලැබුණාට පස්සේ ඒකෙන් අපේ හිතේ තියෙන අඩුපාඩු මැකෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට ඊළඟ දේ හැම වෙලාවෙම ඕනේ. ඒක නිසා හැම වෙලාවෙම තණ්හාවේ ස්වභාවය තමයි ඒ ඇතුලේ තියෙන හිස්කම. ඒ හිස්භාවය කවදාවත් තණ්හාවෙන් වහන්න බෑ කොච්චර ගෙනල්ලා බඩු මුට්ටු පුරවගත්තත් කියලා ඒ විදිහට කිව්වා. හැබැයි මාර්ගය වඩද්දී භාවනා කරද්දී අපි ඒ සිදුර අපේ තියෙන හිතේ තියෙන අඩුව අපි මකන්න පටන් ගන්නවා කියලා කිව්වා. අපි සන්තුෂ්ඨිතාවයේ වඩනවා. අපි තණ්හාව ටිකෙන් ටික ෂය කරලා දානවා. එන්න එහෙමයි ඒ සිදුර අපේ හිතේ තියෙන ඒ සිදුර වහලා දාන්නේ කියලා ඒ විදිහට කිව්වා. එතකොට කරුණාවන්ත වෙමින් ඒ විදිහට කාරුණික වෙමින් මෛත්‍රියෙන් යුතුව අපි කවදා හෝ ඒ මාර්ගඵල නිර්වාණය අවබෝධ කරගන්නවා. එතකොට අපි පුද්ගලයෙක් විදිහට සම්පූර්ණ වෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. එතකොට සම්මා දිට්ඨිය ඇවිල්ලා අපිට මේ කියලා දෙන්නේ මොකද්ද මේ ජීවිතයේ අරුත, මොකක්ද අපේ අරමුණ. එතකොට මේක තමයි මාර්ගය අපිට අවසානයේදී පොරොන්දු වෙන්නේ. අපිට ජීවිතයේ ඇත්ත මීනින් එක, ඇත්ත තේරුම, ඒ තියෙන වටිනාකම, සැබෑ වටිනාකම අපිට ලබා දෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට තණ්හාවෙන් ඒකට අපිට ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට ලැබෙන්නේ මේ තියෙන මාර්ගයේ ගමන් කරලා ඒ සන්තුෂ්ඨිතාවයෙන් කියන එක එහෙම කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ මාර්ගයේ අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕන තවත් කාරණයක් තමයි මේක ඇවිල්ලා සතුටු මාර්ගයක් කියලා. දැන් සූත්‍රවල දැක්වෙනවා ඒ සීලය නිසා හිතේ විපිලිසරකම, හිත කරදර වෙන එක, හිත චෝදනා කරන එක නැති වෙලා යනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඒ චෝදනාව නැති නිසා හිතේ සතුටක් එනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඒ සතුට ප්‍රීතියක් බවට හැරෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. ප්‍රීතිය කය සංසිඳීමට පත් වෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඒ කය සංසිඳීම ඊළඟ සුඛයක් බවට පත් වෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඒ සුඛය ඊළඟට සමාධියක් බවට පත් වෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. සමාධිය නිසා අපි ඇත්ත ඇති හැටියෙන් දකින්න පුළුවන්කම ලැබෙනවා කියලා කියනවා. එතකොට මේ මාර්ගය සීලෙන් පටන් අරගෙන මේ මාර්ගය ඇවිල්ලා සතුටු විදියේ මාර්ගයක්. බෞද්ධ විදියට අපි දුක ගැන කතා කරාට මේක මේ දුක්ඛාකාරී මාර්ගයක් නෙමෙයි. ඇත්තම කාරණේ ඇවිල්ලා අපි දුක කියන එක අවබෝධ කරගත්තාම අපිට තියෙන්නේ සතුට. ඒක තමයි ඒ ඉහළ අවබෝධයේ ස්වභාවය. හැබැයි අපිට අර බැලුව බැලමට හිතෙන්නේ බෞද්ධ විදියට මේ දුක ගැන තමයි කතා කරන්නේ. ඒක නිසා මේ මාර්ගයත් එක්තරා දුක්ඛදායී මාර්ගයක් කියලා අපිට හිතෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් ඒ සමාධියත් එක්ක අපිට ලැබෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා ඒ අවසාන ඒ ප්‍රතිඵලය. ඒ සමාධියෙන් පස්සේ එන ප්‍රඥාව. එතනදී සානාසි උපමාවක් දුන්නා. ඒ යාළුවෝ දෙනෙක් හිටියා. එක යාළුවෙක් ඒ කන්ද අකුඩට නැග්ගා. කන්ද පාමුල ඉන්න යාළුවාට ඒ කන්ද උඩ ඉන්න යාළුවා කිව්වා, යාළුවා මට පේනවා මේ ඈත තියෙන ලස්සන ඒ වටපිටාව කියලා. කන්ද යට ඉන්න යාළුවා කිව්වා, මම ඕක විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඔහොම එකක් එහෙම දෙයක් නැහැ කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒ උඩ ඉන්න යාළුවාට එපා වෙලා පල්ලහැට ඇවිල්ලා අර යාළුවව ඇදගෙන ගිහිල්ලා උඩට පෙන්නනවා. දැන් මොකද කියන්නේ කියලා. ඒතර ඒ යාළුවත් පිළිගන්නවා, ඔව් ඒක ඇත්ත. මෙහෙම උඩට ආපුවාම ලස්සන වටපිටාවක් බලන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ කියලා කිව්වා මේ සමාධිය කියන එකත්. සමාධිය කියන එක ඇවිල්ලා ඒ කන්ද උපමා කරා. ඒ සමාධි ස්වභාවයට පැමිණුනාම ඒ කන්ද උදුනේ ඉඳලා අපිට දේවල් ඇත්ත හැටියෙන් පේනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් තවත් ඒකට එතනදී බුදුහාමුදුරුවන්වත් එතනදී උපමාවට ගැලපෙවවා සාහනාසේ බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝත් ඒ කන්ද මුදුනේ ඉඳලා කියන අපිට උඩට එන්න කියලා. අපි හැම වෙලාවෙම කියනවා බෑ. ඒ කන්දට නගින්න මං එන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. ඒ විදිහට අපි පල්ලහැ එන්න තමයි අපේ කැමැත්ත තියෙන්නේ කියලා එහෙම කිව්වා. ඊළඟ තව උපමා කතාවක් දැක්කුවා. ඒ එක්තරා ඒ ධම්මපදට කතාවේ එන කතාවක්. මොකක්ද? පණුවේගේ කතාව. යාළුවෝ දෙන්නෙක් හිටියා. ඒ එක යාළුවෙක් ඒ විදිහට ඊළඟ පණුවෙක් කියලා ඉපදුනා. අනිත් යාළුවා දෙවියෙක් බවට පත් වුණා. ඒ දෙවියා බැලුවා කො මේ අනිත් යාළුවා මොකද උනේ කියලා. පණුවෙක් කියලා ඉපදලා තියෙනවා. ගොම ගොඩක තමයි ඉන්නේ. ඉතින් ගිහිල්ලා ඉවරලා කතා කරාලු යන් දිවි ලෝකෙට කියලා. එතකොට පණුව ඇහුවලු මට බෑ යන්න. මේ ගොම ගොඩක් ගාන්ට රස්නේ. හොඳට ඕන තරම් කෑම කන්නක් තියෙනවා. ගොම මේ දිව්‍ය ලෝකේ ගොම තියනවද කියලා අහනවා. එතකොට දෙවියා කියනවා දිව්‍ය ලෝකේ ගොම නැහැ කියලා. ඉතින් එහෙනම් මට එන්න බෑ කියලා එයා ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරනවා කියලා කියනවා. ඉතින් ඊට පස්සේ දෙවියා උත්සාහ කරනවා කියලා කියනවා මේ පණුවව අල්ලලා කොහොම හරි අරන් යන දිව්‍ය ලෝකෙට. ඒක හරියන්නේ නැහැ කියලා කියනවා. ඉතින් ඒ විදිහට සාන්නාස අපිටත් අවවාද කරා. අපිත් සමහරවට ඒ වගේ තමයි අපි මේ අල්ලන් ඉන්න දේවල් අත්හරින්න සූදානම් නැහැ. හැබැයි මේ අල්ලන් ඉන්න දේවලුත් ඇත්තරම අවසානයේදී දුකට හේතු වෙන දේවල් තමයි අපි අල්ලගෙන ඉන්නේ කියලා ඒ විදිහට ඒ කාරණේ සිහිපත් කරා. ඉතින් අවසානයේදී අපෙන් ඇහුවේ ඔබ ලැහැස්තිද දේවල් අත්හරින්න කියන දේ. ඔබ මේ මොකද මේ ලෝකය කියන එක ප්‍රශ්න ගොඩක් තියෙන තැනක්. යුද්ධ හැම ප්‍රශ්නයක්ම මේ කෙලෙස් නිසා මිනිස්සුන්ගේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන තැනක්. ඉතින් අවසානයේදී මේකේ සතුටක් කියන දේක් ලබන්න බෑ. ඇත්ත දේ ඇවිල්ලා ආධ්‍යාත්මික මාර්ගය කියන එක තෝරා ගැනීම කියලා ඒ විදිහට දැක්කුවා. ඉතින් ඒක නිසා සම්මා දිට්ඨියෙන් යුතුව ඒ මාර්ගය වඩන්න කියන එක සිහිපත් කරා. එතකොට මේ ධර්ම දේශනාවේ අරගෙන අරන් යන gedara අරන් යන්න තියෙන අවසාන පණිවිඩය විදිහට සවනස් කිව්වේ කරුණාවන්ත වෙන්න කියලා කිව්වා. සිතෙන් කායෙන් වචනයෙන් කරුණාවන්ත වෙන්න, භාවනාවේදී කරුණාවන්ත වෙන්න, තමන්ට කරුණාවන්ත වෙන්න කියලා කිව්වා. එතකොට ඒ කරුණාවන්ත භාවයෙන් අපි ගොඩාක් අපේ මාර්ගයේ සෑහෙන දුරක් අපිට යන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා ඒ විදිහට සිහිපත් කරා. මේක තමයි ස්වාමීනාසගේ අවවාදය කියලා ඒ විදිහට දක්වලා අපි උනන්දු කරවලා මේ ධර්ම මාර්ගයේ යන්න ස්වාමීනාසගේ දේශනාව අවසන් කරා. ඉතින් එහෙමනම් අද දවසේ දේශනාවට සවන් දුන්න ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලාට මෙහෙණ වහන්සේලාට ගේ පින්වතුන් සෑම දිනාටම තෙරුවන් සරණයි.
Good evening, and we have come to the final segment of the day. Ajahn Bramali will conduct a guided metta meditation. After that, we have Punyanumodana, and until everything is over, please remain seated. And for those who have brought any pirikara to be offered, there's a table outside, and he will come and bless them afterwards.
20 minutes?
20, 25.
Yeah, okay, until just before 4 o'clock, yeah.
We have time.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. Okay, everyone, so I hope you have enjoyed the day. So to finish off in a nice way, let's do some real practice together and do some metta, just to kind of purify ourselves a little bit and kind of get the process going with living the spiritual life in the right way. So sit comfortably wherever you are. Close your eyes. And the start of the meditation is always about finding a degree of comfort and ease in the body and mind. Just beginning by just feeling where you are. It's been a long day, and it's nice to be able to relax a little bit and just to go inward and let go of the world to the best of our ability. So to be able to do this, it's important to take the middle way where the body sort of disappears, the body becomes irrelevant. To do that, you need to be at ease, you need to be comfortable, you need to don't have any stress and things in the body. And just feel how nice it is to just sit quietly, not having any interaction with the surroundings, being an island unto yourself, a refuge unto yourself, going in, allowing the world just to be, and staying inside. There's something very delightful about that, and just having no business in the world whatsoever, enjoying the peace of the moment. And just patiently allowing things to be, not really trying to control anything, just enjoying the peace. Don't focus on anything, just allow everything to be as it is. Remember to be a passenger. You are not in charge. Your job is just to enjoy the view out of the window. Whatever happens is okay. No control, no judgment, just enjoying the journey. And when you feel at ease and relaxed, also you want to bring out a positive perception in your mind, something that lifts the mind, uplifts it, makes it brighter and more clear. And one of the ways of doing that is just to enjoy this beautiful companionship with so many Kalyanamittas. The Buddha is there in the background, ever present with his teachings. And then there is the suttas that we have been listening to, and just spending time with good friends. There's nothing better than that in terms of ease, in terms of positive feelings, being able to be together in a positive way. And now, if you like, bring to mind the idea of positive spiritual qualities, what it means to be generous, what it means to be kind, what it means to be compassionate. Bring these ideas to mind. What does it feel like to experience these qualities? And then remember that there are many beings in the world who are endowed with such delightful spiritual qualities. Many beings like that, beings worthy of true happiness and contentment. And so now, coming from your heart, wish all beings in the world, wish them happiness. May all beings be happy and well. And just keep on saying this mantra, may all beings be happy. It's important that you mean it, that you really wish happiness to all beings. And as you do wish happiness to all beings, you can start to feel that something is moving inside of you. It's as if your spirits are lifting, your heart is opening up, and you start feeling this beautiful feeling, what is the idea of compassion and metta combined. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. Gently, gently. May all beings be happy. You don't need to say it too much. Just say it with meaning, say it with purpose, really wishing happiness to all beings. And as you do that, feel the feeling afterwards. What does it feel like to spread true kindness to all the beings in the world? May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. All beings want to be happy. But sometimes their conditioning is so difficult. Sometimes they are just blind. They don't know how to find happiness in the world. So have a sense of compassion for these beings. Kindness and compassion going together. May all beings be happy. And now turn your attention to all the people here today and know that these are all good people that you're with here. What a wonderful thing it is to share a moment like this with these good people. Everyone here today, thank you for being my Kalyana Mitta. Thank you for being part of this event. May every one of you, may you be well. May you be happy. And how are you feeling now? And if you do feel an improvement in the quality of your mind, a bit more gentle, a bit more peaceful, a bit more joyful, whatever it might be, try to understand why that is the case. How does the process of meditation work? Okay, so that is the end of the meditation. So please come out and we will do the final blessings and final announcement. So please let's finish off for today.
පුරා දවසක් ධර්මයේ සමග ගත කිරීමෙන් සියලු දෙනාගේම සිත් තුළ තිබෙන්නේ සැනසෙල්ලක් බව මා දන්නවා. පහසුවක් බව මා දන්නවා. මේ මොහොතේ විනාඩියක් කැප කරන්න කැමති මේ සියලුම ව්‍යායාමයන් පිටුපස ගාමක බලවේගයක්ව සිටි මේට මාස 4කට හෝ 5කට පමණ පෙර අපවත් වූ මිත්තවිහාරී ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ පිළිබඳව සුළු මතක් කිරීමක් කරන්නටත් අද දවස තුල අප සියලු දෙනා රැස් කරගත් සියලුම කුසල උන්වහන්සේට අනුමෝදන් කරන්නටත් මේ සුදුසු අවස්ථාවක් කියලා මා හිතනවා. වසර ගණනාවකට පෙර මේ බණ්ඩාරනායක පරිශ්‍රය සහ ලංකාවේ විවිධ ප්‍රදේශවලට ආජාන් බ්‍රහ්මවංශ ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේව වැඩම කරවමින් නිරන්තරවම තිරය පිටුපස සිටමින් කුඩා සිරුරක් තිබූ දැවැන්ත ආත්ම ශක්තියක් තිබූ මෙත්තවිහාරී හාමුදුරුවන් නොවන්නට ඔබ අප මේ දහම් රසය විඳින්නට ඉඩ නොතිබුණා. ඒ නිසා අප සියලු දෙනාම රැස් කරගත් සියලු කුසල් උන්වහන්සේට අනුමෝදන් කරමු. සාදු සාදු සාදු. May I invite you also to remember මෙත්තවිහාරී හාමුදුරුව and we'll have some videos on that. Yeah, you start.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I have been asked to say a few words in commemoration of Venerable Metta Vihari, who passed away quite recently. He was the one who basically started this society related to Ajahn Bramali and related to our Buddhist society in Perth in Australia. And he was one of those monks who was very hard-working and always doing a lot for the purpose of the Dharma and for the purpose of doing wonderful things. You can see him there on the picture. That's him. And he was very humble and very hard-working at the same time and did so many good things. And it's a wonderful to be able to remember him here today for all the goodness that he did. The reason why we're able to have an event here today is because of the hard work laid down by him over many, many years. And we are now living off the continuation of that. So thank you very much, Venerable Metta Vihari. Wherever you may be now, I am sure that you are rejoicing in a lot of happiness. And thank you so much for your services to the Buddha Dhamma and the Sasana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So let us finish today by sharing the merits, and we'll give a quick blessing at the very end. Just to let you know, it's been very, very wonderful to be back in Sri Lanka again. Always meeting many old friends, meeting many new people, and it's always delightful to be in such good company. So thank you so much for coming today here, and let us finish off by sharing the merits together here. Edang men yati nang hoatu sukita hontu nyata yo. Edang men yati nang hoatu sukita hontu nyata yo. Edang men yati nang hoatu sukita hontu nyata yo. And just a brief blessing to finish off the evening here. Nati me saranang anyang Buddho me saranang varang etena sachava jena sotite hotu sambada. Nati me saranang anyang Dhammo me saranang varang etena sachava jena sotite hotu sambada. Nati me saranang anyang Sangho me saranang varang etena sachava jena sotite hotu sambada. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, farewell everyone, and see what happens for the future, but we might see each other again in the future if things go in a certain way. See what happens. In the meantime, bye-bye.
Once again, much merit to you, Bhante, for spending your whole day with us today. And this is after running a 7-day retreat, and I don't think the organizers really got every single minute out of his stay here. And once again, thank you very much for your active participation by being on time and being silent. I'm sure the day is a memorable day in your life, and may the inspiration you got today will be an encouragement to be more committed to drive on the path of Dhamma. May your path be smooth and fast. Theruvan Saranai.